Part 66. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 678. Buzz. The door of Liuyi Hall was slowly opened. A group of people strode into the Liuyi Pavilion. An attendant tried to stop them, but was slapped on the ground. Who dares to break in like this? Everyone on the second floor stood up and glared at the intruder. There were not many people in this group, only 5 or 6, but each one was at the level of a great master. After this group of people rushed into the 6 Arts Hall, they paused and lined up on both sides to make way for them. Since you are one of the best in the world, why don't you let people in the world know if you are the best in the world? With loud laughter, the 3 of them walked into the 6 Arts Hall calmly. When Su Tong heard the voice, his heart trembled. Why is he here? Others may not know these 3 people, but Su Tong actually recognizes 2 of them. The person walking on the left is burly and as strong as an ox. Isn't he one of his new teammates, Gu Zibai? The person standing next to him was a scholar, fair and fair-looking, but there was a sinister and cunning look between his eyebrows, which made it hard for people to like him. Su Tong didn't recognize this person, but the one walking in the middle was an old acquaintance whom he met for the second time. The latent dragon came out of the abyss, and the leader of Motuo stopped. Lu Ji strode forward with a domineering attitude that was like an innate sense of oppression, making the luck on everyone's heads tremble, and even the less powerful bodies became stiff and speechless. Who is he? People who have never met Lu Ji can't help but have this question in their minds. For example, Ashina, facing Lu Ji's pace, he began to feel a very uncomfortable feeling in his heart. The golden and jade exquisite ball on his abdomen was much bigger than when he met Zhang Haisheng before. Beating harder. The golden lion above his head was completely suppressed and shivering this time, and kept making low roars from his mouth. Ashina's luck is enough to travel the world without any hindrance. But unfortunately today, I met Zhang Haisheng, and in the blink of an eye, I met Lu Ji. The luck of the 2 people became more abnormal than the other. His luck was like this, let alone Su Tong's. When he looked up, the blue clouds had dispersed, the dark clouds covered the top, and there was already a faint appearance of bloody light. Good guy, I'm going to be in trouble. Su Tong's heart skipped a beat and he looked Lu Ji up and down. He saw black clouds surging behind Lu Ji, and a black dragon emerged from time to time, disappearing and appearing in the sea of clouds. When a hidden dragon emerges from the abyss, it must reach its peak. It has only been so long since Yu Yang, but this guy's aura has already undergone earth-shaking changes. Sure enough, unless a person with this kind of luck is beaten to death with a stick, he will become more and more courageous with frustration until he is unstoppable. Little brother, long time no see. You are very lucky. You can even learn the magical powers of Buddhism. But you said that your ability to take a beating is unparalleled in the world. I don't believe it. How about I give it a try? Lu Ji stared at Su Tong with a cruel smile on his lips. This little heir apparent, Li Zheng, repeatedly ruined his good deeds. In Yuyang City, he summoned the Yin Shen and struck him with 2 sticks, giving him 20 years of life. He did not originally intend to deal with Li Zheng. After all, his purpose in dealing with the descendants of the royal family was not to go against the imperial court. He just wanted to take away the luck of Buddhism and promote the teachings of Motuo, but now he had to kill this kid. The reason is simply that he should not have entered Buddhism, and he should not have written poems for Buddhism, which greatly increased the luck of the Buddhists. 2 poems will greatly increase the Buddhists' luck. If he is asked to write 2 more poems, then don't hold any Suantan Dharma assembly. The Buddhists' luck will be greatly improved, and it will be difficult for him to seize his luck. So when he heard that Su Tong was coming to the 6 Arts Hall today and would be hosting the envoys from other countries, Lu Ji knew that his opportunity had come, or that he had to come. I was afraid that Su Tong would become popular in poetry here and write 2 more poems, but unexpectedly, Instead of writing poems, this boy would talk about his ability to be beaten. I expected that this kid must have cultivated the Buddhist Vajra supernatural power and was sincerely showing off. Since this was the case, I just happened to go with the flow and send this kid on his way. Hearing Lu Ji's words, before Su Tong could speak, the old monk from Tianzu, who had just admitted defeat, stood up and stood in front of Su Tong. Amitabha. Your Excellency is a heavenly being, and yet you want to attack a junior. It seems like you are bullying others with your power. Am I bullying others? Lu Ji stretched out his hand to scratch his hair and pointed at the head of the old Tianzu monk in front of him. He was about to argue with him about what it meant to bully others. But after thinking about it, I didn't bother to talk nonsense with him, and just said, what the old monk said is wrong. Since he is the best in the world, why should I use my power to bully others? After Lu Ji finished speaking, he strode forward. Black clouds surged behind him, dragons roared 4 times, and huge amounts of luck combined with his aura. The old monk from Tianzu turned blue in the face and had to retreat step by step. But the old monk from Tianzu remembered that the prince behind him had a great connection with Buddhism, so he had to bite the bullet and face him. Amitabha, Your Excellency has gone too far to bully others, and this poor monk can only act like a chariot with a mantis. The old monk clasped his hands together and chanted the name of the Buddha. Behind him appeared the image of the Buddha. His 3-foot-long golden body was bathed in the Buddha's glory. His precious appearance was solemn, and he stood motionless in front of Lu Ji. Seek death. Lu Ji's face turned cold, and he suddenly reached out and patted the old monk's head. Amitabha. The old monk recited the name of the Buddha, with the 3-foot golden body behind him, and waving his arms to bloom immeasurable Buddha light. After 70 years of hard work in cultivating the golden body, he felt as if the real Buddha had come to the world. However, Lu Ji's face showed excitement when he saw this, and he saw a dragon's head transforming into his palm, opening his mouth to gnaw on the golden body. Kick kick kick. The harsh cracking sound made everyone wrinkle their foreheads, and the old monk's face gradually became ferocious. Broken. Others could not see clearly, but Su Tong relied on his life ikumen to see the giant dragon coming out of the abyss behind Lu Ji, coiling around the old monk's head, and swallowing up all his luck. When Chen Xianzang returned from Tianzu, he built a 6-foot golden body and founded the Faxiang section. How come you, an old monk from Tianzu, are not half as good as Chen Xianzang? Humph, there is no one in Buddhism. Lu Ji stared at the old monk, and suddenly a red light burst out from his palm. He turned his palm into a fist and punched it down. The black dragon roared in front of him, shattering the Buddhist golden body and hitting the old monk's chest. Puff. Suddenly the old monk vomited blood, his body flew out and fell heavily to the ground. When everyone looked again, they found that the old monk was no longer breathing. Be brave, this is the Liuyi Pavilion, how dare you kill an envoy from a foreign country? Some officials stood up and yelled. As soon as he said these words, Lu Ji raised his finger, and the next moment, a bloody hole as big as a thumb appeared in the official's throat. Since enlightenment is a heavenly being, how can a heavenly being be subject to the constraints of the mortal world? But in fact, gods are also humans. Nowadays, Pei Yuan, Mu Tiantong and even Long Hushan, the best in the world, cannot be restrained by the laws of the imperial court, but they must more or less rely on the current imperial court. But Lu Ji was different. The Mochuo cult was wanted by the court, and he was also a wanted criminal by the court. Since he was here this time, he had no intention of abiding by any laws. Just like his luck, the hidden dragon emerges from the abyss, lawless, and nothing can restrain it. For a moment, everyone shut up, not daring to say no again, for fear of offending this heavenly being and causing a major crime in the world. Lu Ji killed the Tianzu monk and walked straight towards Su Tong. I won't bully you. If you can hold on for even one stick of incense, I will consider you to be the best in the world. Lu Ji had a look on his face. He was supposed to take advantage of the situation in Yuyang City, but this little kid ruined his life and lost 20 years of his life. He had no intention of killing Li Zheng so easily. If you want to play, just play slowly. Su Tong did not speak when he heard this, but just looked at Zhang Haisheng. When Zhang Haisheng saw Su Tong looking at him, a smile appeared on his face. Don't look at me, you are bragging yourself, you have to be honest. Upon hearing Zhang Haisheng's statement, Lu Ji raised his eyebrows slightly. In fact, he noticed Zhang Haisheng as soon as he entered the door. Although he has no life sight or celestial vision, he can still detect the unfathomable luck in this young man, and it seems that he can even control his own luck. Fortunately, this person and Li Zheng don't seem to be fighting each other, and he doesn't have to worry about the other party interfering. When Su Tong heard Zhang Haisheng's words, he couldn't help but look bitter, and covered his heart with grief. After that night, I thought you were mine, but I didn't expect that we would eventually fly away when the disaster came. Zhang Haisheng was startled. He didn't expect that at this time, Su Tong would dare to talk nonsense. He couldn't help but cursed, "Bah! If you say one more thing, I will kill you now." The corner of Su Tong's mouth twitched, he turned his head and muttered in a low voice, "What a damn girl to pull up your pants and not recognize anyone." After saying that, he ignored Zhang Haisheng's murderous look at the side, stood up slowly, straightened his clothes, and walked towards Lu Ji. "Goodbye Yuyang, I haven't seen the leader for a long time." The leader has now achieved great success. Since he wants to test the juniors themselves, there's no reason to dodge. It's just, this kind of test is too boring. How about we get another lucky draw? Hey, you want to raise your bet? Lu Ji looked Su Tong up and down, wanting to see what other bargaining chips he could bring to the table. Su Tong didn't waste any time. He took out the incense box from his sleeve and put a yellow incense stick in his hand. He looked at Ashina and walked up to Ashina with a smile. "Take it." "I take." When Ashina saw this, he was about to refuse without even thinking about it, but before he could speak, Lu Ji glanced at him. Not only did Ashina's heart skip a beat, but the golden jade ball in his abdomen almost jumped out of his throat. So he could only take Huang Xiang in his hand with a dark face. The bet is also very simple. For one stick of incense, if I am lucky enough to survive from the leader, please do me a favor, leader. What's the deal? Lu Ji looked at Su Tong thoughtfully. Su Tong pointed his hand at Ashina, who was still confused. "Kill him and bury him with me." Ashina. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 679. Ashina was stunned for a few seconds. "I don't want it." But Su Tongke ignored Ashina's resistance and looked at Lu Ji. "The leader is here today. There is absolutely no reason for me to survive. I am not picky. I am just afraid of being lonely on the road to hell, so I always want to accompany me alone. This the leader wouldn't be stingy at all. No, 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 if you want to die, don't hold me back." Ashina waved her hands repeatedly. However, Lu Ji was very generous and glanced at Ashina. "The prince of the barbarians is worthy of being buried with you." When Ashina heard this, her face turned dark and she wanted to refute, but when she saw the look in Lu Ji's eyes, she wisely shut up. Players are not invincible. This top-level combat power in the scenario world is simply not something they can resist. So he could only look at Su Tong with his resentful eyes. "I couldn't help cursing in my heart that I was really unlucky for 8 lifetimes this time. I obviously had the golden and jade exquisite ball to bless my luck, but I went to the script studio and was told that there was only one identity mask left. I thought he was a prince of a great kingdom, but when I got here I realized that he was a great bullshit country and a bullshit prince. He didn't take any advantage and was buried with him first. If this matter ends, I must go to the script studio and apply for arbitration again." Su Tong lightly pinched the yellow incense with his fingers. and saw the yellow incense burning up. He patted Ashina on the shoulder, "Hold it tight, the incense is broken, and the legs are broken, ha 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 ha. Why don't you ask him to be buried with him?" Ashina suppressed her anger and glanced at Zhang Haisheng, who was enjoying the wine calmly. Su Tong glanced at Zhang Haisheng standing aside and found that Zhang Haisheng had an expressionless face and seemed not to care about Su Tong's little tricks at all. He couldn't help but shook his shoulders helplessly, and said meaningfully, "We have a good relationship. After all, he is a good brother who is willing to sacrifice his life for me." Even the dogs didn't believe what he said, and even Ashina wouldn't believe it. It didn't matter whether he believed it or not, Ashina could only pray in her heart that Lu Ji could teach this bastard a lesson. Su Tong lit the yellow incense and walked to his seat. "I'm ready. Shua." As soon as his words came out, Lu Ji's figure blurred instantly, Su Tong's pupils tightened, and only an afterimage could be seen in front of him. The strong wind hit him immediately, causing him to subconsciously raise his arms to block it. Raising his left arm, the arm was quickly covered with a layer of fine black scales, and a shrill golden Buddha light burst out among the lightning and flint. The Along scale armor and the diamond seal were activated by him at the same time, but he still underestimated how terrifying the power of Lu Ji's palm was. Boom! The sound of a thunderous explosion made Su Tong's left cochlea buzz, and time seemed to slow down several times at this moment. He could even clearly see the obvious dents on his arm, followed by an overwhelming force rushing down this arm. Even though Su Tong desperately wanted to control this force, he found that this force seemed like the wild beast surged through his body uncontrollably. In an instant, Su Tong was shot 5 or 6 meters away. His body was like a thrown ball. After falling heavily to the ground, he bounced up in the air. But that's not the end of it. The next moment, Lu Ji's figure had arrived beside him, with a look of pleasure on his indifferent face, and kicked Su Tong in the abdomen. Boom! Everyone's heartstrings tightened, and the huge impact sounded like it hit their hearts hard, making everyone's heartstrings lift. Da-da! Broken bluestone bricks hit the ground like hail. A shallow pit with a diameter of half a meter appeared in front of him. Su Tong was lying in it with a big letter. His body was wrapped in blue scales, but it could be seen that the scales on his arms and lower abdomen had exploded. Lu Ji walked to the shallow pit, squatted down, raised his head and glanced at the cubicle on the 3rd floor. "Look, you helped them last time, but they are going to kill you this time. You are on the wrong team." In the cubicle on the 3rd floor, Gu Piwen remained silent, unhurriedly peeling off the peanuts in his hand with one hand, took one out and put it in his mouth. Facing Lu Ji's teasing downstairs, he turned a deaf ear. Su Tong twisted his body in the shallow pit, rolled and stood up again, half kneeling on the ground, blood gurgling from the corner of his mouth. His face was distorted by pain. He took a deep breath and then tilted his head to look at Lu Ji standing in front of him. He grinned and bared his teeth, which were stained red with blood. "That's it?" Hiss. Lu Ji's eyes were covered with a layer of frost. He raised his palm and swept it down from the air. There was no physical contact, but it was like a heavy hammer hit him on the shoulder. Su Tong's body swayed, and his knees broke the bluestone of the floor. What a good prince, he is good at not imitating. He has learned the skills of the Yang ruffian, and he really looks like that. It was said that Lu Ji's fingers were like moving an abacus, gently tracing the green scales on Su Tong's body, and his slender nails made a crisp sound of ding, ding, ding. Suddenly Lu Ji's fingers stopped, and with a flick of his fingertips, a scale was pulled off. Ah! These scales were connected to Su Tong's skin and flesh, and the huge pain of being torn off made his muscles all over his body tremble uncontrollably. "Kill him, kill him." Ashina on the side looked at this scene, not to mention how happy she was in her heart. She wished she could imitate Zhang Haisheng and drink and watch the show. But with the yellow incense stick in his hand, he really didn't dare to move it, for fear that if he accidentally broke the incense stick, he would be in trouble. These scales are so beautiful. Just right. I'm still missing a mat. I wonder if you have enough scales. Lu Ji picked up a scale and put it in his hand to examine it carefully, and asked Su Tong thoughtfully. If you had told me earlier, I would have eaten fatter and given you a few more scales. The muscles on Su Tong's face were trembling, but his mouth was still grinning, looking careless, which made Lu Ji more and more annoyed. Grabbing his hair, he lifted him off the ground. I don't believe how long you can last. As he spoke, Lu Ji's fist hit Su Tong's abdomen one after another. Each punch was so powerful that the black scales on his abdomen exploded. Vomit. The blood was mixed with the minced meat and spat out together. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it just happened to be spat on Lu Ji's fist. Looking at the hot blood, Lu Ji couldn't help but throw Su Tong to the ground with disgust on his face. He picked up the wine on the table as water and rinsed it casually a few times. Then he took out an embroidered towel from his sleeve, followed Su Tong's example and raised his head, looking at the cubicle on the third floor. That's it? Gu Piwen and Mu Tiantong looked at each other. Mu Tiantong suddenly stood up, but Gu Piwen grabbed his arm and shook his head, signaling not to interfere. The luck of Buddhism cannot last longer. Li Zheng has the great luck of Buddhism, and it is not just as simple as his two poems. Although there is no evidence, Gu Piwen concluded that the Buddhist treasure that was pulled out of the ghost market, it must have fallen on this kid. Otherwise, how could a kid who can't even memorize Buddhist scriptures develop the magical power of Vajra? Could it be that those monks in Buddhist temples who have been eating, fasting and chanting sutras for decades have all practiced their spiritual practices on dogs? You're really not afraid that Unzi will fight you tooth and nail? Mu Tiantong turned his head and asked what he was most worried about. He doesn't dare. Gu Piwen stuffed a peanut into his mouth with a sneer on his face. If he died, he would have nothing to say if Yunbian cut his body into thousands of pieces and smashed his bones into ashes. But he was still alive, even if he was about to die, as long as he could still take a breath and open his mouth to speak. Unzi did not dare to do anything to him. Even if a great protector like Unzi made him anxious and risked his life before dying to give him a sincere message, Unzi would regret until his intestines turned blue. How terrible is the power of sincerity! It is said that when Sakyamuni became enlightened, the demon king Bosun made a prophecy. He said that although he could not do anything to the Buddha, he had countless disciples and descendants who would put on Buddhist cassocks in the future, imitate the Buddha's appearance, twist his scriptures, tamper with the teachings he left behind, and then pretend to be like him. To confuse the world, and finally destroy it and stink it until no one believes it anymore. When Sakyamuni heard this, he could only cry silently. It can be seen that even if the sincerity is successful, even the Buddha cannot change it. Although I don't have the ability of Demon King Bosun, I can still risk my life to bring Buddhism to a disaster. Why? Mu Tiantong sighed. After all, these old guys are scheming against a young baby. It is inevitable that they will have a knot in their hearts. She just hopes that this matter will be over and that she can do her best to give this prince save the souls of the dead. Hey! Why is this kid getting up again? At this time, Mu Tiantong suddenly noticed something. He turned around and walked to the window to take a look. Sure enough, he saw Su Tong's body swaying on the ground and slowly standing upright from the ground. You can still stand up. Lu Ji turned around and looked Su Tong up and down. You look a bit like a Yang man. Ahem, cough, cough, I haven't finished lighting the incense yet. You don't have much time. I have to cherish the time for you. Su Tong coughed up the blood in his mouth and straightened his waist. The strong smell of blood filled his whole body. And the luck above him seemed to have declined to the extreme. But the moment he stood upright with his legs, his thin body was like a mountain shrouded in clouds, making it impossible for anyone who saw it to know how high the mountain was or how deep the water in it was. Why is this bastard still alive? On the side, Ashina looked at Su Tong with a ghostly look, then looked at the incense candle in his hand that had been burned to only 1/3, and his face suddenly turned cold. Time was running out, and he wanted to urge Lu Ji to hurry up and kill this kid, but when the words came to his lips, he swallowed them honestly. He muttered in a low voice as if to comfort himself, "If I really want to kill him, I think 1 second will be enough." Not necessarily. However, at this moment, Zhang Haisheng suddenly spoke, with a serious look on his face, looking at Su Tong, who stood up again in front of him. "Didn't you realize that this guy has never been able to use prop cards?" Hearing the buzzing sound in Ashina's head, he seemed to be inspired by Zhang Haisheng's words. After recalling everything that had just happened in his mind like lightning, he realized that it was indeed as Zhang Haisheng said, this kid had been there from beginning to end. He didn't use any of the abilities of the prop cards, so he was just being beaten with his own flesh and blood. Ashina's mood instantly became complicated. "You are really not afraid of death?" Lu Ji's eyes were still sharp. Although there was still 1/3 of the incense candle left, Lu Ji was tired of looking at this kid covered in blood. Any top player has his own pride. What's more, an enlightened heavenly being like Lu Ji, with such evil in his heart, naturally doesn't want to continue to torture such a small character. "Remember my face, don't embarrass me again in the next life." Lu Ji's voice fell, and in one step he came to Su Tong's side, raised his palm, aimed at Su Tong's Tianling cap and took a picture. In this flash of lightning, a bright red light suddenly appeared in Su Tong's empty eyes, and he raised his arms brazenly to block his head. Useless work. The moment this thought flashed through Lu Ji's mind, his palms fell on Su Tong's arms. Boom! A manic wind swept between the two, and everyone closed their eyes subconsciously. Yuan Shushi held Wan Rong tightly in his arms and turned his head away, unable to bear to look any further. But when the strong wind swept across everyone's face, they were surprised to find that Su Tong was still alive. Not only was he alive, his arms were as stable as mountains and blocked Lu Ji's palm. How can it be? Ashina stood up suddenly and stared with wide eyes. He didn't notice that Zhang Haisheng on the side had a surprised look on his face. He slowly stretched out his palm and wiped it under the bridge of his nose. He saw that the bright red blood was stained red. With my own hand, my mind suddenly flashed back to Su Tong's meaningful smile when he lit incense for Ashina. He is a good brother who is willing to sacrifice his life for me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 680. It was not just Zhang Haisheng who was injured. Gu Zibai, who was watching the battle not far away, couldn't help but let out a dull snort. It's just that he has a strong physique, so it's not as obvious as Zhang Haisheng. Su Tong slowly raised his head, with a hint of cunning in his eyes, like a cunning fox showing its tail. Guardian skill, righteousness. It consumes 30 script points. After activation, when there are more than 2 teammates within 30 meters of you, the damage you receive will be shared equally. Now that Zhang Haisheng and Gu Zibai were sharing 2/3 of the damage for him, Su Tong suddenly felt the pressure greatly reduced and raised his head to look at Lu Ji. "Senior Lu, time is running out." Lu Ji looked back at the almost burned out incense candle in Ashina's hand, and couldn't help but feel surprised. When he started, this boy's luck must have been crushed by him. How could he still stand up, and even manage to hold onto his own palm? Not only Lu Ji was surprised, almost everyone couldn't believe it. Strangeness. Mu Tiantong, who was in the cubicle on the 3rd floor, looked through the black cloth on his eyes and saw that the luck behind Su Tong had been completely crushed by Lu Ji's luck. As the saying goes, his luck was about to run out and it was hard for the gods to save him. But the strange thing is that not only did this kid not die, his own luck even began to show new signs, as if there was some invisible force helping him. Killing you 10 times is enough. After Lu Ji said this, he no longer held any reservations. He didn't believe that he was a Taoist and a heavenly being. How difficult could it be to kill a boy who had entered the Taoist realm? Lu Ji lifted it up with one hand, seeing the reality and reality intertwined in front of his eyes. As time passed, the space in front of Su Tong's eyes changed, and a huge mountain-like statue of Mo Tu appeared in his sight. The 8 arms of Mo Chuo are spread out, holding the sun in his left hand, the moon in his right hand, and clasping his hands together. Each of the 4 arms holds 4 magical instruments, which respectively symbolize disease, natural disasters, man-made disasters, and war. Mo Chuo pushed open his palms on his chest, and a black ripple visible to the naked eye surged out like a tide. The terrible shockwave is like a world-destroying storm. Facing Lu Ji's full attack, Su Tong was still smiling and opened his arms. The broken scales on the body have recovered again. Both feet stepped heavily on the ground, and a steady stream of life force was pouring into Su Tong's body along his legs. Everything is rejuvenated. Ashina's pupils suddenly tightened, and he recognized at a glance that the ability Su Tong activated at this moment was the active skill, Source of the Earth, in the top-notch item card Rejuvenation of all things that he held. Active Skill 1, Source of the Earth. It consumes 200 script points. After activation, it can continuously absorb life force from the ground under your feet, increasing your own recovery effect by 200%. And enhance physical defense by 40%. Immune to dark control skills below level 6. Duration, 3 hours. Cooling time, 3 days. When the shadow group chased him, he fell into the immortal worshipping formation of the 5 Immortals Hall, but the bearded man among them was very ferocious. Not only did he forcefully break through the immortal worshipping formation with his own strong physique. Even at the end of the battle, it still showed strong vitality, precisely because of the support of this top-notch item card. Although Su Tong does not have the matching prop cards like Big Beard, he does have a dark long body. His physical body has long been extraordinary, and he has perfectly inherited the dark physique's ability to restrain dark power. In addition, it is blessed by the Vajra seal. And the passive of rejuvenation, Rising Sun, physical toughness increased by 20%, physical defense increased by 40%. Su Tong didn't believe that he couldn't hold on, don't forget, because he was not alone in bearing this hurt. Not good. Zhang Haisheng noticed something was wrong, and his expression suddenly changed. He quickly formed seals with his hands and silently recited the Taoju. Golden Mountain Curse. As he recited the Daoju, Zhang Haishen's body suddenly glowed with golden light. However, unlike the Buddhist Vajra divine power, the golden light on Zhang Haishen's body was more like a flowing liquid, wrapping Zhang Haishen's body tightly while gradually dissolving. Make a golden mountain to cover him tightly. Gu Zibai had a grimace on his face and cursed in his mind. He knew that this guy would do no good if he framed her as a member of the team. But when things came to a head, he didn't dare to be careless. He activated the skill of the prop card, causing the muscles all over his body to begin to squirm, causing his body to suddenly shrink in a circle. Rumble. Under the impact of the black ripples, Su Tong's body felt as if he had been hit by a high-speed truck. The scales on his body aged and fell off quickly the moment they were stained by the black ripples. This is the way of Lu Ji. Chaos, war, disease, and man-made disasters are all sources of suffering that cannot be done due to the general situation. Often a person's strength will become particularly pale and powerless in the face of these things, and even his own luck will quickly wear away until he dies. The fact that Lu Ji said this also shows that this man has a madness in his heart that wants to bring trouble to the world. No matter what princes, grandsons, or officials of the great Zhou dynasty, so what if the saint comes in person? How many people in the world can stop me from the people I want to kill, Lu Ji? However, the madness in Lu Ji's eyes stopped abruptly when he saw Su Tong still standing in front of him, and he couldn't help but show a look of horror in his eyes. This is impossible. In the turbulent darkness, Su Tong stretched out his hands, like a dragon trying to break free from the darkness, and stepped forward step by step with difficulty. The dragon scales on his body shattered, but new dragon scales quickly grew out at a speed visible to the naked eye. The sound of a strong and powerful heartbeat was like bursts of drumsticks. With each powerful beat, a large amount of pure demonic energy quickly repaired his body. Is this impossible? I told you that when it comes to getting beaten, I am the best in the world. Su Tong stared at Lu Ji with burning eyes, ignoring the resentful looks in Zhang Haisheng and Gu Zibai's eyes. You haven't become enlightened yet, so what nonsense are you talking about? Lu Ji was startled. He was so distracted by Su Tong's crazy appearance that he jumped up and rushed towards Su Tong. He raised his hand and punched Su Tong directly in the heart. Lu Ji could tell that there was something wrong with this kid's heart, as if there was a steady stream of power pouring out. Obviously Lu Ji blamed all the problems on Su Tong's heart. It's just that he ignored another thing. Just when Lu Ji reached out to grab Su Tong's heart, an unstoppable murderous aura pierced out of Su Tong's hand. Pyrophilia. The Chunyang sword came out, and the flames exploded on the blade. At the moment Su Tong activated the Demon King's coming, several flames merged with each other to form a unique vermilion fire, which exploded towards Lu Ji in front of him. Boom! For a moment, the vermilion flames covered the entire Liuyi pavilion with a layer of red frost. Even an enlightened heavenly person like Lu Ji was caught off guard and was blown away by the huge flames. Leader. The people from the 28 stars of the Motuo sect who came with Lu Ji couldn't help but change their expressions when they saw this, and they rushed forward to check. Roll. Just a gloomy roar of anger made them stop. They saw a black evil aura pouring out of Lu Ji, who was wrapped in flames. When he stretched out his hand, they saw that all the flames on his body gathered in the palm of his hand. It condensed into a small fireball. Lu Ji looked at the vermilion fireball in his hand and looked at Su Tong. He calmed down and lifted the clothes off his chest. It was then that everyone discovered that Lu Ji was actually injured. An incision was made from his chest to his lower abdomen. The strange thing is that although the wound is clearly visible, not a drop of blood seeps out. Cut. Su Tong curled his lips when he saw this. Sure enough, the gap in strength was just a gap after all. If he wanted to kill Lu Ji with his current strength, he was still far away. He immediately put the long sword behind his back and pointed at the incense candle in Ashina's hand. Sorry, Senior Lu, the time for a stick of incense has come long ago. After hearing this, Ashina woke up and took a closer look. Sure enough, the incense candle in his hand had been extinguished at some unknown time. His face suddenly turned bright and dark. Okay, I admit, your ability to take a beating is the best in the world, absolutely. Lu Ji admitted that everyone present was not surprised. What is the concept of enlightenment? The realm between heaven and man is the best in the world. Except for some special places in this world that he can't break into, nothing can stop him. If you can survive in the hands of an enlightened person, why can't you be regarded as the best in the world? Lu Ji glanced sideways and looked at Zhang Haisheng aside. Whirring. I saw that Zhang Haisheng finally dispelled the Jinshan curse, and his face turned pale. Seeing this, Lu Ji probably understood what was going on. Although he didn't know the details, he did feel an unfathomable amount of luck just now, which severely damaged his luck. It seems that this person secretly helped Li Zheng. However, at this moment, Zhang Haisheng suddenly raised his head and glared at Su Tong. You bastard! You are using me. As he said this, Zhang Haisheng took off the wealthy clone from his wrist, threw it to Su Tong, and at the same time threw out the notice to apply for withdrawal from the team. Even a third of the damage would be a huge pressure for Zhang Haisheng. After all, he was not known for his physical strength. When Fa Cai in the hall saw the clone being thrown towards him, he immediately stretched out his slender tail and curled it up, then took the clone back into his body. Are you sure you want to quit? Su Tong looked at Zhang Haisheng. Zhang Haisheng remained silent, his eyes sharp. Obviously this was not a discussion with Su Tong. If Su Tong disagreed, he would forcefully quit. He could still afford the compensation. Su Tong sighed, and calmly took out an elixir from the prop book with one hand and held it in his palm. He walked up to Zhang Haisheng with a slightly apologetic expression on his face. Anyway, thank you. Without you, I can't hold on. Zhang Haisheng's expression softened a little when he saw Su Tong suddenly thanking him so sincerely. However, he had made up his mind to draw a clear line with Su Tong, and Gu Peiwen also promised that he would give him an opportunity tonight to help him further his cultivation. He didn't believe in Gu Peiwen, but he also didn't believe in Su Tong. I saw Su Tong pick up the wine glass and put it to his mouth. Meeting is always fate. It's a pity that I can't see you on the day when your path is finally fulfilled. When we meet again in the next life, we can be friends. After saying that, he drank all the wine in the glass, and then decisively agreed to Zhang Haisheng's application to withdraw from the team. Seeing this, Zhang Haisheng was startled, and felt a little soft-hearted for no reason. I'm going to die, why don't you give me a drink? Su Tong looked at Zhang Haisheng with sincere eyes. Zhang Haisheng sighed after seeing this, reached out and picked up the wine glass. Let's go. He said that he wanted to drink it all in one gulp. But the moment he was raising his glass to drink, Su Tong suddenly bumped into Zhang Haisheng's arms, and suddenly raised the corner of his mouth slightly. That's weird, you have this body, I will be jealous of you all my life. Zhang Haisheng was alert, raised his hand and punched Su Tong, but the punch was missed. Su Tong's figure shrank to the size of a palm in full view of the public, and he got into Zhang Haisheng's clothes. Collar, like a huge mouse scurrying back and forth under Zhang Haisheng's clothes. At the same time, I heard Su Tong shouting, don't be stunned, run quickly, this old thief Lu is doing something wrong. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 681. Get out of here. Zhang Haisheng went crazy and tried his best to catch Su Tong in his arms, but Su Tong was like a mouse, scurrying around in Zhang Haisheng's clothes. No matter how Zhang Haisheng grabbed left and right, he couldn't catch Su Tong. It turned out that while he was drinking, Su Tong took the elixir body shrinking pill refined from fat and slender tuchuo. Shrinking pill. After eating it, the body size will be reduced 10 times without affecting one's own physique, but one's own strength will be reduced 10 times, but the movement speed and dodge ability will be increased 10 times. Duration, 30 minutes. I'm not going out. If you want me to go out, let old thief Lu kneel down and knock on the ground to invite me. Su Tong's voice was so loud that everyone could hear it clearly, let alone Lu Ji. When everyone heard this, they murmured in their hearts, good guys, just now they were talking about Senior Lu, and in the next moment they were talking about old thief Lu. Their faces changed too quickly. Su Tong didn't care about this. Lu Ji couldn't beat him on his own, and the reason why he resisted until now was entirely to complete the mission. Now that Lu Ji has admitted that he is the best in the world, a reminder sound came from the mission, reminding him that he has completed the side mission. Now that the mission has been completed, why would I foolishly go to fight with the devil Lu Ji? Do you look like you are tough? I am not the fool like Gao Zhou. The most important thing right now is to escape, but if he wants to escape under the nose of Lu Ji, an enlightened man, it is not a joke. Moreover, Su Tong knew in his heart that Lu Ji was not the only one who wanted him to die. Think about who sent you the invitation letter and the unseen figures in the cubicle on the 3rd floor. Su Tong knew very well. It seems that the devil Lu Ji is here to kill him, but in fact, this is simply a battle of luck between Buddha and Taoism. Lu Ji and himself are both tools in the game between the two parties. If he died, he would just die as the crown prince of Prince Gong, a marginalized little person of the Li family. The murderer was the wanted criminal of the imperial court and the leader of a cult. It was unclear whether anyone in the imperial court had a headache for Su Tong, but except for his cheap father, whom he had never met, no one would mourn for him. Since he couldn't run openly, he could only play rogue and hug Zhang Haishan's waist tightly. Su Tong didn't believe it. Even if Zhang Haisheng had the nerve to strip himself naked in public, he probably wouldn't have the guts to ask Lu Ji to help him tear himself off. Sure enough, as Su Tong shouted, Lu Ji's face became even more ugly. This little bastard. Not only was Lu Ji's expression ugly, Gu Piwen almost stuck his head out to curse. Knowing that this boy was cunning, he didn't expect to act like a rogue. He had learned all the tricks of the Yang gangsters. In a blink of an eye, he saw Lu Ji's increasingly ugly expression. Gu Piwen knew that this kid couldn't be killed today. Not daring to hesitate any longer, he walked to another window behind him and took out a bamboo tube from his sleeve. Hey, think about it clearly. If this kid survives tonight, it will be your turn to be unlucky. Mu Tiantong held Gu Peiyuan's wrist. Once the communication tube in his hand was sent out, the Hunshan prison, Chongxian pavilion, Dali temple, and even the Xinwu guards would be alerted in a short time. Lu Ji is naturally not afraid of these people. If he wants to leave, no one can stop him unless he asks the master of Longhu Mountain to come down from the mountain. But even Lu Ji had to leave. After all, enlightenment only means the success of the Great Road. When the world calls him a heavenly being, it is just an honorific title, and he has not yet reached the true state of immortality. The most troublesome thing is that Lu Ji left and Li Zheng survived. It is probably self-evident who will be unlucky next. Sure enough, as soon as Mu Tiantong said these words, Gu Piwen was really confused. At this time, the sound of fighting came from downstairs. Lu Ji couldn't sit still. If Li Zheng cannot be killed today, it will be difficult to seize the opportunity next time. Lu Ji's figure flickered and moved to Zhang Haishan's side. I'll help you. Sensing the appearance of Lu Ji beside him, Zhang Haishan's expression sank, and he no longer cared about Su Tong. He clasped his hands round and stepped on the 7 stars. For a moment, his figure transformed into countless after-images and slipped quietly past Lu Ji's hand. This is the authentic Taoist Mizong view. Even in this era, it is rare to be able to use it as skillfully as Zhang Haisheng. Senior, I won't bother you anymore, I have a way to get him out. Zhang Haisheng quickly distanced himself from Lu Ji. Having luck does not mean he is invincible. Although Zhang Haisheng is arrogant, he is not arrogant. Even though he is carrying King Qin's 800 years of luck, in reality, there are many strange things in the world. A strange technique that specifically harms people's luck. Especially in this day and age. Don't forget, in this era, the victory-wearing and praying techniques are the pinnacle of popular techniques. Although I haven't encountered them, it doesn't mean that I haven't heard of them. But after Zhang Haisheng finished speaking, he couldn't help grinning and slapped himself on the chest. As a result, Su Tong had already moved away. Immediately afterwards, I heard Su Tong shouting through his clothes, "If you take me out, I will make you a eunuch." When Zhang Haisheng heard this, his legs tightened and he cursed angrily, "You are so sick, this has nothing to do with me." Ashina hid aside and nodded in approval after hearing the words. But Su Tong didn't care about this. If he risked his life, no one would be able to live well. Just play. Seeing that Zhang Haisheng and Su Tong were noisy, Lu Ji stopped waiting and said, "Then you two will go to hell together." After saying that, Lu Ji opened his hands, and the image of Moda appeared behind him again. Zhang Haisheng had just seen Lu Ji's methods with his own eyes. He didn't have the bronze skin and iron bones of Su Tong. When he saw something was wrong, he simply used Qingcheng Mountain's unique Qinggong. His figure flashed and split into several after images. The real body was like a sharp arrow, jumping directly to the second floor window to run away. I want to run. There is no door. Seeing Zhang Haisheng trying to escape, Lu Ji immediately got up and chased him with his men. Can't wait any longer. Seeing that the situation was beyond his control, Gu Peiwen really didn't dare to wait any longer this time. He raised the bamboo tube in his hand and twisted his fingers at the end of the bamboo tube. Zi. I saw a stream of fire shooting out of the bamboo tube, shooting straight into the sky, and then exploding in mid-air with a boom sound. Dark red fireworks exploded in mid-air, lighting up the entire night sky. Many people who didn't know why saw this and thought someone had set off the fireworks, raised their heads and watched. But at this time, drums began to sound from the surrounding watchtowers. Dong dong dong. Along with the drums, there are also changing signal lights. Some of the officials' family members who had some knowledge on the road immediately changed their expressions when they saw this, and took their family members home as soon as possible without saying a word. Swish, swish, swish. More and more black figures on the streets quickly began to gather on the rooftops. It's a signal. Sure enough, something happened. Cao Huazheng on the roof looked at the exploding fireworks with a worried expression, his fists clenched tightly. Commander, this is Lu Ji, the leader of the Moduo sect, and the stars of the Moduo sect. Several people quickly gathered around him, and one person quickly took out the information and sent it to Cao Huazheng. Looking at the detailed intelligence content above, Cao Huazheng frowned, and the person on the side continued, there has been movement on the Xinwu Guard side. It seems that 2 of the 9 divisions, Huayao Yinghuo and Shuiyao Chenxing, have not moved. Commander, this matter has nothing to do with us. It's just a fight between the Li family and the Wu family. Even the saints won't care about it. Let's not get involved. The water is too deep. The person who spoke was an old man. He was very old, but he did see things more clearly. It is not so much a battle between Buddhism and Taoism as it is a battle between Li and Wu, or even a battle between the new ministers and the old ministers in the court. It involves all aspects that cannot be interfered by these bad people. Notify brothers, monitor secretly, and don't start a conflict. As he said this, Cao Huazheng rushed over to take a look. But at this time, several people in front of him blocked his way. No, the commander-in-chief ordered Tan Lang to be raped tonight. If he leaves the mansion, he will definitely be killed. Humph, even if the old guy from Chongxian Hall talks nonsense, you will believe it. Cao Huazheng snorted coldly. If it weren't for Mu Tiantong, he should be sitting in the Liuyi Pavilion at this moment, instead of staying here to watch the stars. This time Lu Ji made a big fuss in the Liuyi Pavilion. It may not be that Chongxian Pavilion and Hunshan Prison were behind it. Otherwise, how could Lu Ji get the news so quickly and show up at just the right time? The most ingenious thing is that the great monk Yuan Xiang, who has to chant sutras to Su Tong every day, was called into the palace by the saint tonight. I heard that when the saint was reciting sutras, he suddenly felt something in his heart and summoned the great monk Yuan to explain it to him. But why is the time stuck so coincidentally? It was precisely because of this that Cao Huazheng became suspicious of Mu Tiantong. Mu Tiantong is the curator of Chongxian Pavilion and a recognized master of Yi Shui. It is rumored that his eyes are Tiantong, which can see things that are invisible to humans. Don't take it seriously, Commander. There are rumors in the world that when Mu Tiantong was born, his eyes were blindfolded by his father and he began to practice. It was not until he was 7 years old that he established the foundation and began to see. It was not until he became enlightened that he blindfolded his eyes again and no longer saw with the naked eye. In the human world, it is called the pupil of the sky. But, the old people in my village often say that dogs can see things that humans can't see. Don't you understand that when it comes to luck, it's admirable to trust it, but you can't trust it completely. After speaking, Cao Huazheng ignored the dissuasion of these people, jumped out of the mansion, stepped on the beams, and quickly went straight to the south according to the signal instructions from the watchtower. But just as Cao Huazheng walked away, he didn't know that an indifferent face in the shadow seemed to have been waiting for him in the corner for a long time. His eyes were fixed on Cao Huazheng's back, and his figure quickly hid in the shadow and followed him quietly. Go up. Happy May Day to everyone. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 682. Shuashwashwa. Under the night sky, two black figures stepped on the rafters and galloped through the huge city of Luoyang. The two moved in tandem, at an astonishingly fast speed. Can you please run faster? Old Thief Lu is about to catch up. Get out of here as soon as possible, I'm not done with you anymore. Zhang Haishan's face was dark, and the blue clouds under his feet were walking in mid-air as if they were walking on flat ground. Considering his cultivation level in the Taoist realm, it was extremely rare to be able to barely be on par with Lu Ji behind him. This is also thanks to his good Qinggong and the blessing of the prop card. Otherwise, it would be a fool's errand to escape from the eyes of an enlightened person. He glanced at Lu Ji, who was following closely behind him. Even though he ran as hard as he could, the distance between the two could only be maintained at 300 steps. Seeing this, Zhang Haisheng was secretly worried. If he could open the distance by 600 steps, he was confident that he would quickly disappear from Lu Ji's sight, but the distance of 300 steps was like a death line, making him dare not relax at all times. Once the distance between the two is within 200 steps, there is no need for him to run. Run to Luhi. Su Tong said at this time, as long as you run to Luhi River, I will be able to help you. Do you think I will believe you? Zhang Haisheng glanced in the direction of Luohi, but he didn't believe Su Tong's words. If this guy stabs himself at a critical moment, he won't be able to bear it. After all, if it were him, it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing if he could get rid of a destined nemesis at this moment. If you don't believe me, you will be knocked down, but if you keep running, you will only die. Lu Ji has already caught up with you if he wants to catch up with you. Now he is hanging you in a hurry, just to force you to run out of the city. But once you get out, once you reach the city, even the great Luo Immortal will not be able to save you. Su Tong was now lying in Zhang Haishan's arms, watching the fire clearly from the other side. The sound of drums in the distance clearly meant that Lu Ji had alerted the Xinwu guards in Luoyang city. As long as Zhang Haisheng can hold on and the Xinwu guards come over, Lu Ji will leave even if he doesn't want to. After listening to Su Tong's analysis, Zhang Haisheng didn't know what Lu Ji was planning. Just hearing Su Tong's teasing voice, Zhang Haisheng suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of boredom in his heart. If you want to go to Luhi, you should go by yourself. I won't be fooled by you again. As he spoke, Zhang Haisheng seemed to have made up his mind. Suddenly his figure stepped lightly on the mud tiles. He suddenly stopped and turned to look at Lu Ji, who was catching up behind him. His eyes gradually became firm. I can do anything you can do. Since you don't want to leave, let's give it a try and see if I can hold on. The worst is, we'll go to hell together. Zhang Haishan's words were so precise that Su Tong, who was hiding in his arms, couldn't help but be stunned. Huh. Seeing that Zhang Haisheng stopped running, Lu Ji was quite surprised. He slowed down and stared at Zhang Haishan. What a pity. If I give you another 3 to 5 years, you will be the best in the world. Lu Ji could tell that the young man in front of him was someone with great luck. He might have the opportunity to enter Taoism in less than 3 to 5 years. Old Thief Lu, stop talking nonsense and fight if you want. I'm not afraid of you. The person who spoke was not Zhang Haisheng, but Su Tong, who was hiding in Zhang Haisheng. As soon as these words came out, Lu Ji was very angry. Humph, why do you need to hide on others to use your words? If you two join forces, you may still have a way to survive. But, even if you lie to me, don't try to trick me out. Just do it quickly and don't act like a bitch here. Yes, Lu Ji was really angry and funny when he heard this. He has seen shameless people before, but he has never seen such a shameless person. I think your shame is the best in the world. After saying that, he straightened his eyes and looked directly at Zhang Haisheng in front of him with sharp eyes like lightning. Facing the serious eyes of an enlightened man, Zhang Haisheng was surprisingly calm, as if Su Tong's provocation was his own intention. Quiet, indifferent, unchanging in the face of shock, once you have made up your mind, you will not be shaken by other external things. This undoubtedly convinced Lu Ji that the young man in front of him had endless potential in the future. Exactly, I also want to see whether you are lucky or I am better. Lu Ji finally had murderous intentions. The image of Mochuo appeared behind Lu Ji, with 8 arms moving slowly. Countless black smoke was spit out from Mochuo's mouth. The black smoke covered the sky and the earth, blocking the sky, and finally evolved into a huge black millstone that swallowed Zhang Haisheng. Shrouded in it? Not good. In the distance, Gu Pei Yuanzhang, Mu Tiantong, and others were chasing this way, but before they could get close, Mu Tiantong's eyes were like lightning. Seeing the strange appearance of heaven and earth, he immediately stopped Gu Pei Yuan and stopped him from going any further. It's a trick of trouble, don't go. Mu Tiantong looked serious. The teachings of the Modha sect were completely opposite to Buddhism, and this calamity trick was even more weird and domineering. As the name of the technique suggests, chaos, war, disease, and man-made disasters are the 4 major disasters in the world. The 4 disasters turn into millstones, trapping people in them. Every time the millstone rotates, it not only consumes people's energy and blood, but also consumes people's energy. Luck. Even if it is a god, it will turn into blood even if it takes a moment or 3. Even Mu Tiantong didn't dare to go in rashly. He even dared not let Gu Peiyuan follow him into danger, otherwise if he was not careful, his friend might have to meet the king of hell on the spot. What surprised Mu Tiantong was that when Gu Peiyuan saw the black fog in the distance, the impatience on his face calmed down. He took out a handful of copper coins from his sleeve and sprinkled them on the ground. Mu Tiantong took a look and saw that it turned out to be Jigua and Shui Ziji. Rumble, rumble. To outsiders, it was just a sign of clouds shrouding it, but in front of Zhang Haisheng at this moment, it was no less terrifying than the sky falling apart. The aura of disaster was like a huge millstone going up and down, sandwiching him in the middle. Every time the millstone rotates, it emits a scream of ghosts and gods. Before your eyes, you can see corpses floating thousands of miles away, battlefields of blood rivers, thousands of miles of desolation and chaos. It was as if he was in a troubled world with one disaster after another, and his luck was quickly being worn away by these 4 disasters. In the blink of an eye, a large piece of the green hills above his luck turned out to be withered. Creation is connected to the Xian, the Blue Dragon and White Tiger teams are fighting, and the Suzaku Suanwu bodyguards are fighting. Seeing this, Zhang Haisheng did not dare to be careless. He took out a coin in his hand, recited a mantra at the same time, stepped on the tiangang, pinched his fingers and threw it, "Get up." The money flew up in the air with a whooshing sound and hung above the head, shining brightly. A little spiritual light rose under Zhang Haisheng's feet, and a 4-elephant altar rose from the ground. At the 4 corners of the altar stood the 4 elephant divine beasts of green dragon, white tiger, red bird, and black basalt. On both sides stood 2 yellow-turbaned warriors. Ah! The 2 warriors roared, stepped firmly on the altar with their feet, stretched out their arms, and their bodies were like pillars of strength, seeming to push away the haze. Zhang Haisheng's eyes were like lightning, and an ancient pine appeared behind him. The ancient pine matched Zhang Haisheng's luck. It stood on the top of the green mountain, resembling a horned dragon lying on its back, winding and stretching into the air. There are 3 crystal clear pine cones on the tree, which are shining brightly at this moment. So strong. Su Tong couldn't help but secretly gasp when he saw this. Zhang Haisheng was indeed the one who had enjoyed the 800 years of King Qin's luck. His strength was ridiculously strong, and he already had 3 Dao fruits. That's just one step away from being able to join the Tao. This speed, at this age, would be enough to be called a genius in any era. Senior Lu, this junior is not talented, but he also has the heart to spread his wings to the 9 heavens. Today, this junior will sacrifice his life to accompany the gentleman. Let's see if Senior Lu has great magical powers, or if I am a simple and ignorant person. Zhang Hai secretly gritted his teeth. What Su Tong can do, I can do too. I shouldn't be inferior to him. Zhang Haishan's fingers were as fast as lightning, and he quickly drew a talisman. He picked up the wicker on the table and lightly twitched the talisman. Clang! There was a hollow sound, and golden light burst out, forming a terrifying golden light that shot straight into the sky. As if condensed with the heaven and earth, every time it is struck, the void trembles, as if it is trying to force a way out of this millstone. The fierce collision between the two is like the ancient god coming to the world and suppressing the sky, and like the undercurrent pouring down and covering the vast earth. You are better than that brat. Lu Ji nodded, acknowledging Zhang Haishan's strength. There is absolutely no one in the younger generation of this generation who can compare with him. 3 years, no, maybe 1 year is enough. This young man is probably the first of the proud people in this generation who can achieve enlightenment before the age of 30. It's a pity. Lu Ji's eyes were cold and cold. You don't have that chance. Behind Lu Ji, the figure of Mochuo has his arms spread out. Only these 2 arms can be seen. The left hand holds the sun and the right hand holds the moon. The 2 merge together to form a solar eclipse sign, shining with terrifying white light and sending out heart-stopping fluctuations, both as big as a small mountain. When the light shines down on your head, all life is extinguished. The 2 yellow turban warriors were illuminated by the white light, and their huge bodies turned into stone statues in an instant. They immediately made a rumbling sound, and countless cracks opened on their bodies like spider webs. When there is still time to breathe in the disaster, but when people really survive the disaster, they will realize that time flies like a fleeting moment. In the blink of an eye, in the past few years of disasters, they have muddle-headedly changed from a high-spirited young man to an old man who was lucky enough to survive. And this is the horror of time. Kick kick kick. With a huge roar, the 2 yellow scarf warriors turned into countless rubbles and collapsed. What's even more terrifying is that the white light penetrated Zhang Haishan's golden light and shone directly on the altar. The originally exquisite and solemn altar began to break apart under the illumination of white light, and collapsed like a ruin smashed by people in the chaos. This. Everyone who had already rushed over was frightened when they saw such a scene. Lu Ji's strength was so terrifying. Even though the court had thousands of troops, Lu Ji was able to pass through them unimpeded. Although there were divine guards guarding Luoyang City, it would not be easy to kill him. Is it possible that we really want to ask the Heavenly Master to come down from the mountain? Cao Huashan's figure came to the roadside street. Looking at the terrifying scene in front of him, he was secretly speechless. On the other side, Mu Tiantong and Gu Piwen were so nervous that cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. It was now a matter of whether they could hold on. Under the white light, everything is dull. Zhang Haisheng formed a seal with his hands, and summoned a magical mirror in his palm to block it in front of him. However, under the light, the mirror began to decay and break. For a moment, a sliver of white light shone on Zhang Haishan's body through the cracks in the broken mirror, making his skin age quickly. Come on, if you can't hold on, just say something and I'll help you. Su Tong hid behind Zhang Haisheng, secretly feeling a cold sweat for Zhang Haisheng. The life icon opened, and when he looked around, he saw that the green mountain above Zhang Haisheng quickly turned into a gray forest under the white light. The green trees on the mountain have completely withered, the rivers and streams have dried up, and what was obviously a treasure mountain has turned into a barren mountain. Don't say sarcastic words. Zhang Haishen's face turned livid and he gritted his teeth tightly. I'm definitely not worse than you. As he spoke, the broken hair on Zhang Haishen's forehead had begun to turn blue-gray. Yellow spots gradually appeared on the skin on his face, and his whole figure suddenly turned into a dying old man, and his consciousness began to gradually blur. Haisheng! Haisheng! In a daze, Zhang Haisheng heard someone calling him from behind, and the familiar voice made him turn around unconsciously. Master! The face of the hazy figure could not be seen clearly. It was a Taoist priest standing on the top of the mountain. Haisheng, Master named you Zhang Haisheng, do you know why? The Taoist stretched out his palm and saw white snow starting to fall from the sky. The bright moon shines on the sea, and we are at this moment across the world. Master, please let me find a good wife in the future. A child came over with a lollipop in his hand and muttered. The Taoist put his hand on the child's head. Zhang Sheng boiled the sea and changed his fate against the will of heaven. They are all owed by me, Qing Cheng Mountain. You only need to remember one sentence: all actions are impermanent, which is the law of birth and death. After birth and death, be happy in silence. Remember, these are the words left to you in your previous life. All actions are impermanent, which is the law of birth and death. The birth and death has ceased, and cessation is happiness. Zhang Haisheng murmured to himself. At this time, I only heard Master say, it's snowing, let's go down the mountain. After the heavy snow passes, the scenery will be beautiful again. Hearing these words, Zhang Haisheng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. When he came back to his senses, he saw that the Taoist man and the naughty boy had disappeared. His vision blurred for a while. When he forced his eyes open to see clearly, he realized that he had already disappeared. Passed out and fell to the ground. And there was a person standing in front of him. It was Su Tong who was hiding on him. It turned out that Su Tong saw that the situation was not good and had to jump out of Zhang Haisheng. At the critical moment of life and death, Su Tong did not dare to hold back anymore. Holding the sword of pure yang in his hand, his body actually produced pure yang fire. A lotus paper lantern was suspended above Su Tong's head. The hanging lantern illuminated the road, shining brightly, and even temporarily blocked the white light coming from Motuo. This hanging lantern to illuminate the road is originally a 7-door technique. It uses one's own energy and spirit as a guide to ignite the fire of life, which can illuminate the yin path and drive away evil. But at this moment, Su Tong was at the end of his rope, so he used the power of Wuxiang to transform into a pure yang body, using this method to ignite the soul fire to stop Lu Ji. However, this was obviously just a reluctant struggle, and white light still shone on Su Tong's body, causing his body to rapidly age and decay. You're crazy. Seeing Su Tong standing in front of him, Zhang Haishen's eyes widened immediately. This guy is really a madman, he even dares to try this method. You go. Sensing that Zhang Haisheng had woken up, Su Tong did not look back, but used all his strength to tell Zhang Haisheng to leave quickly. This time, I may really not be able to hold it any longer. Next time we meet, let's have another drink. The moment these words were spoken, Su Tong-gren was almost exhausted. The originally strong body was already as thin as a stick, and Li Zheng's outline could still be vaguely seen on his face, but even if Prince Gong came in person, he couldn't help but wonder who this old man who looked like he was about to die was. Between life and death. The passage he had just remembered flashed through Zhang Haishen's mind again: the impermanence of all things is the law of birth and death. Life and death are gone, and death is bliss. Looking at his hands, he read the next words from his heart-like mouth. One thought generates thousands of dharma. I have the power to support the sky. Just as the saying goes, the law follows. In an instant, Zhang Haisheng understood his own cause and effect and understood the past. He saw that the green mountains that were already desolate in his fate suddenly started to snow. At the same time, Zhang Haisheng also began to develop a strange Taoist charm. The divine light of Taoyuan diffused from Zhang Haisheng's body, forming a strange rainbow light. Wherever the rainbow light swept, the white light illuminated by Lingmo Dharma disappeared. When Lu Ji saw this, he was immediately shocked. Seeing the rainbow clouds all over Zhang Haisheng's body, his jaw almost dropped. Enlightenment. How is this possible? How can there be such a heaven-defying thing in the world? At the moment of death, when all luck has been exhausted, for the first time in history, one can achieve enlightenment through this. A round of frost in the withered and prosperous years, the spring sun and the clear breeze moisten the mountains and rivers, or make the dead trees disappear into mud, and in a blink of an eye, the mountains are full of spring. Senior Lu, all things are withered and prosperous, the Tao follows nature, thank you for your success. Zhang Haisheng raised his head, the old skin on his face faded away, and in the blink of an eye, a head of black hair regenerated. What was even more shocking was his luck. The mountain forest, which had been withered and desolate, suddenly burst into spring. Everlasting. Luck is even stronger than before. Lu Ji was speechless for a moment, but he had nothing to regret. Li Zheng had lost all his energy, and even the great Luo immortal could not save him. Since his goal has been achieved, there is no need to worry about the young man in front of him. He just hopes that he will not meet him again in the future. Congratulations, I will definitely ask Lu for advice in the future. As soon as Lu Ji finished speaking, he restrained himself from the appearance of Mochuo Dharma behind him and quickly left the scene. It's done. It's really done. Gu Piwen looked at the green light rising into the sky, and his whole body relaxed. The three sincere words had become one of them, and it was still the most difficult one. In the dark, he had already felt that he had the hope of Jean Dao was lost. Immediately the corners of his mouth raised slightly. That's it, don't worry. After saying don't worry, Gu Piwen actually lowered his eyes slightly and fell straight down. Fortunately, Mu Tiantong had quick eyes and quick hands and grabbed Gu Piwen's arm. Old thing. Old thing. Mu Tiantong's expression changed greatly. He touched Gu Peiyuan's pulse with his finger, and his expression suddenly darkened. He slowly placed Gu Peiyuan on the ground. You old thief, you can just walk away, hey. A farewell of life and death, but it is not unique to this family. Zhang Haisheng walked to Su Tong's side and saw Su Tong lying on the ground. His old body had no strength to move a finger. If it weren't for his slightly drooped eyelids, he might have thought that Su Tong had died. But the current situation is not much better. Even with a panacea, there is no way to change the fact that Su Tong's body has completely deteriorated and his life is about to end. Unless this guy can be like him, he can achieve enlightenment with a single thought and realize life, death, and prosperity. But obviously, he does not have such strength. Thank you very much. I owe you a favor in this life. If there is an afterlife, we will be teammates. Zhang Haisheng knelt down and saw Su Tong's lips moving slightly as if he was still trying to shout something. He thought Su Tong had some unfulfilled wish, so he leaned forward and listened carefully. Vaguely, I heard two words coming out from under Su Tong's trembling li. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 683. You are still alive. This time it was Zhang Haisheng's turn to be dumbfounded. Su Tong's vitality was obviously cut off and his body was decaying. Even the arrival of De Luo Tianxian could not save him. But in a blink of an eye, Su Tong was not only alive, but what was even weirder was that his decayed body was also restored to its original state. But soon Zhang Haisheng realized something. You have time to tie the prop card. I was in a trance just now, but I was keenly aware that Su Tong seemed to have changed in time. In addition, Su Tong is now rejuvenated and his condition has returned to its peak. To explain all these problems, the only time prop card can be used. That is the rarest prop card among many prop cards. Hey! I can't tell you this unless you agree to join the team first. Su Tong jumped out of Zhang Haishen's clothes and did not tell Zhang Haisheng how he did it. He just threw out a new invitation, inviting Zhang Haisheng to join the team. Zhang Haisheng hesitated for a moment when he saw the invitation. Well, we just agreed. You said it yourself. You want to join my team. You won't regret it now. People who practice Taoism can't just keep their word. Besides, this is your first promise after becoming a Taoist. Seeing his hesitation, Su Tong immediately recounted what Zhang Haisheng had just said. All right. Zhang Haisheng was helpless. After all, he said it himself, and he really wanted to know how Su Tong did it. When Zhang Haisheng rejoined the team, Su Tong did not hesitate and directly called out the prop book and showed his biggest trump card to Zhang Haisheng. Time Walker. This is the biggest gain from my gambling toolbook. It is also the trump card that he relies on to survive. This item card has only one ability, Traveler's Mark. Active Skill 1, Traveler's Mark. Spend 2000 script points to leave a mark where you have walked. When you encounter danger, you can activate the mark and turn back time to the moment when you left the mark. The mark interval must not exceed 1 minute. And cannot have an impact on other people and the environment. Cooling time, 1 week. When he saw the entry on this prop card, all the doubts in Zhang Haishen's heart were answered. In fact, when Su Tong saw that Zhang Haisheng could no longer hold on, he jumped out, but before jumping out, he left his mark on Zhang Haishen's body. According to his original plan, at the moment when he was about to die, he pretended to be dead, then quickly activated the mark, transferred it to Zhang Haishen's body and lurked again. Unexpectedly, the plan changed. Zhang Haisheng woke up. Not only did he wake up, he also broke through the shackles and completed the threshold of enlightenment. So much so that Lu Ji took the initiative to stop, pat his butt and leave. It's a pity that I had prepared the expressions and lines I should show when I die, but in the end I didn't use them, which was a waste of emotion. Although the plan did not go as he had envisioned in the script, fortunately, overall it went smoothly than he expected. Zhang Haisheng is indeed a monster who has been burdened with King Qin's 800 years of luck. He can break through this situation, and Su Tong is also envious. Zhang Haisheng and the eldest princess both became enlightened in times of crisis. But the difficulty of the two is completely different. The eldest princess has accumulated hundreds of years of hard work and used the opportunity to become enlightened. Zhang Haisheng achieved enlightenment on his own when all his luck was exhausted. The difficulty between the two is a matter of judgment. Of course, this has a lot to do with Zhang Haisheng being an authentic successor of Taoism. It is as expected. Zhang Haishen's eyes were complicated when he saw this prop card. In terms of luck, none of the 10 Su Tongs are his opponents, but this guy's fortune is too strong. The so-called blessing is God's care for him in the dark, and it is not affected by luck. Not to mention how precious the time prop card is. Let's just say that the skill of the item card in front of me is already quite incredible. Rewinding time within 1 minute, that is to say, no matter how badly Su Tong was hit in this minute, he would quickly return to his best condition at this moment. What's even more frightening is that all the skills and props he used during this period will have their cooldown refreshed, even the prop points consumed during this period are no exception. This kind of ability is definitely one of the most heaven-defying abilities among all the prop cards that Zhang Haisheng has ever seen. If there is a real shortcoming, it is that as a time-based prop card, this prop card cannot reset its cooldown time. Otherwise, this guy would really be invincible. Let's go. Lu Ji has left and escaped this disaster. I'm afraid Lu Ji won't attack you again in a short time. Zhang Haisheng sighed and prepared to go back to the Six Arts Hall. At this moment, Su Tong had no intention of going back. The matter is not over yet, listen to what's going on over there. Zhang Haisheng pricked up his ears and heard the faint sound of fighting in the distance. Lu Ji was so crazy that he openly broke into the Six Arts Hall and killed people. The court must explain this to the public no matter what. Even if Lu Ji could not be killed, at least half of the 28 stars under the Motuo sect would be left behind. Otherwise, after tonight, even if the saint understands what is going on, he will inevitably use a few people as scapegoats to hold him accountable. Are you planning to? Zhang Haisheng noticed Su Tong's thoughts and thought for a moment, well, I have just become a Taoist and I need a few touchstones to verify the fruit of Taoism. Where is the verification of Tao fruit? I think you want to kill people and set fire to them. Su Tong didn't even want to expose him. The Motuo sect was a cult designated by the imperial court. By killing evil masters, one could exchange credit with the imperial court. In the past, there was no chance to kill, but now all the forces have been alarmed. It would be a fool not to fish in troubled waters at this time and go back foolishly. When Su Tong and Zhang Haisheng rushed over looking for the sound of fighting, a group of people had already started fighting. It's Shenwubai. Su Tong sat on Zhang Haisheng's shoulders, raised his head and saw 4 Shenwu guards chasing 2 masters from the Motuo cult. These 2 masters of the Motuo cult are a man and a woman. The man is a water ape in the 28 constellations, and he uses a big barrier sword. The woman is a water worm, and in her hand is a long sword. The 2 are a couple, and they are called Bai Shui Yuan Yang in the world. It is said that the 2 like to pretend to be a couple, and they especially like to go to places where forest bandits are haunted. Once they encounter a robber, the water worm will seduce him with his beauty, wait for the robber to take the bait, and then go on a killing spree to take advantage of the enemy. Therefore, he has a reputation as a chivalrous person in the world of martial arts. Normally, local officials would turn a blind eye even if they learned about the 2 men's whereabouts, mainly because they couldn't defeat them. After all, the Grand Master is not a cabbage. There are very few Grand Master level masters in the local area. Even if there are, 1 or 2 may not be the match of this couple. But this couple encountered a tough problem today. The strength of the 4 Shenwu guards was not weaker than theirs. The horizontal sword in his hand was slashing and slashing, the sword energy was vertical and horizontal, extremely domineering. This is Shenwubai's unique sword technique, called the 36-style water-breaking sword. It is said that it came from fighting in the army. Although its moves are simple, its lethality is astonishingly terrifying. Combined with the horizontal sword in the hands of Shenwubai, the power is astonishingly powerful. Compared to the tacit understanding of the couple, every move of the 4 Shenwu guards was perfectly coordinated, like cold killing machines. Under the encirclement and suppression of the 4 divine guards, the 2 men soon began to show signs of retreat. It seems that I can't make it this time. When Zhang Haisheng saw this, he was about to leave. It was already a certainty that the couple would be strangled, so there was no need for him to take any unnecessary steps. Fortunately, something seemed to have happened on Lu Ji's side, causing his 28 stars to flee in all directions. If we were to chase them now, if we were lucky, we would still be able to find a few good targets. Wait. At this time, Su Tong grabbed Zhang Haisheng's hair, stood up from his shoulders, and stared into the distance. The fun has just begun. Zhang Haisheng paused upon hearing this and waited patiently. The couple was seen fighting and retreating. After a while, their bodies were covered with wounds, but when they retreated to the alley, a black shadow quietly jumped down from the roof of the building. The movement of the black shadow was as fast as a swooping falcon, and it penetrated directly into the Shinwoo guards. Who? Sensing something bad, the two Shinwoo guards crossed their swords and slashed down horizontally. The swords flashed with lightning, and the infinite sword energy slashed out like a torrential rain. In such a narrow alley, facing such a dense aura of swords, even a great master would not be able to escape. However, the speed of the visitor did not slow down, and he slowly raised two pairs of huge fists. Facing the incoming sword energy, he suddenly shook his fists. The walls and sword energy in the alley ahead exploded, and a terrifying and brutal force came, like a 10,000 turbulent wave, so powerful that it was unparalleled, and directly knocked away the Shinwoo guards. The two Shinwoo guards retreated in a hurry, a trace of blood spilled from the corners of their mouths, showing a shocked look. Who is coming? Seeing the powerful enemy's surprise attack, the four Shinwoo guards quickly gathered their formation, their expressions were cold, and they asked in a low voice. But the visitors did not explain. The bright forehead reflected the oily light in the moonlight, and the huge body was like a giant spirit god coming to the world, making them feel an unprecedented sense of oppression. Do it? After the bald man said that, he was like a tiger coming out of its cage, killing the two divine guards in front of him. With the addition of bald head, the situation of the battle changes instantly. The other two Shinwoo guards also lost their rhythm, and Bai Shui Yuanyang and his wife seized the opportunity and attacked them separately. Dang! 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 The swords in the hands of the couple were intertwined, and they were slashing faster and faster. The silhouettes changed the swords in unpredictable ways, and the two Shinwoo guards were instantly confused. Puff! When the couple suddenly changed their moves and the swords in their hands burst out with dazzling light, the two Shinwoo guards were caught off guard and killed by the swords. Ouch! There was a deafening roar of a tiger behind him, and the bald man's fists were entangled with terrible aura, and he punched the chest of the divine guard in front of him. The terrifying force shattered his chest, and a bloody mist burst out from his back. But when he was about to die, the Shinwoo suddenly glared and hugged the bald arm tightly with both hands. I'll fight you. Seeing the tragic death of his companion, another Shinwoo guard slashed with a horizontal knife in his hand, and with the determination to die, he took the head of the bald man in front of him. The bald arm was restrained, and his right leg suddenly rose into the sky. Using the left foot that had taken a half step as a fulcrum, his right foot rose into the sky like a dragon. The protruding toe of the shoe hit the divine guard's chin hard, and there was only a sound of bones breaking. The Shinwoo tilted his neck back, and a mouthful of blood spurted out into the sky. He fell heavily to the ground, and the horizontal knife in his hand was also weakly released from his palm. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 684. After neatly disposing of the four Shinwoo guards, the three of them quickly retreated along the alley without stopping. Why don't you let me take action? After the three people left, Zhang Haisheng walked out of the corner with Su Tong. Since he was already in the state of enlightenment at this moment, there was no way for the three of them to realize that their every move was being monitored. Don't worry, follow me and take a look. Su Tong calculated the time and reluctantly jumped off Zhang Haisheng. After his body landed on the ground, the efficacy of the body shrinking pill happened to reach the critical point. Su Tong's body returned to its original appearance and he took out a set of clothes from the prop book. After putting the ground on his body, he followed with Zhang Haisheng. Although Zhang Haisheng was very strange, he didn't ask much why. The two of them followed slowly. I saw the three people from Moduo Jiao walking south along the signs on the path. When they came to an intersection, the water worm stuck its head out and imitated the sound of a sparrow and shouted twice in the alley. Come out. Accompanied by the two calls of sparrows, ripples appeared in the originally quiet alley like a curtain of water, and several figures walked out of thin air. The leader was the scholar who had walked into the Six Arts Hall with Lu Ji before. Waterworm, you are injured. The scholar glanced up and down at Shui Luo and his wife, and then spoke with concern. It doesn't matter, we met 4 Shinwu guards. If it weren't for Brother Shi's help, we might not be able to come back. Shui Luo waved his hand, cupped it towards the bald man beside him and said, "Thank you Brother Shi. No wonder Brother Shi is valued by the leader. He is really a heroic young man, we admire him." Hey, hey, hey. Okay, okay. Hearing Shui Hao's praise, the bald man felt a little embarrassed by Shui Hao's words. He stretched out his hand and patted his bare head. His honest look was completely different from the indifference he had when he killed Xinwu Wei. People. Everyone shook their heads secretly. This man named Shi Jin was a martial arts fanatic, a genius in martial arts, but other than that, he had no understanding of the world. However, everyone has become accustomed to this, and even the leader said that only with such a pure heart can one make such rapid progress in martial arts. Helmsman, the Shinwu guards are all alarmed, Lord Cult Leader. The scholar raised his hand, interrupting Shui Xiao's inquiry. It doesn't matter, the leader's magical power is incredible, and with the blessing of Mochuo, no one in the world can hurt the leader except the old heavenly master from Longhu Mountain. After the scholar finished speaking, he immediately said, "Without further delay, after the leader has stopped for me, we will retreat from the waterway immediately." "Promise." Everyone responded and wanted to leave. But at this moment, a discordant sound came, interrupting everyone's path. "It's interesting. I originally wanted to catch a tiger, but I didn't want to meet a bunch of rats here." Ah! This sudden sound startled Shui Worm and the others. They looked around and found a person walking out of the shadows. I saw the person who came was dressed casually, with disheveled hair and an unkempt appearance. He walked towards everyone with a smile on his face. Cao was hung. The scholar's heart sank, secretly thinking that this was not good. Immediately, a smile appeared on his face, and he cupped his hands and said, "It turns out to be a bad commander." When the commander arrived, we were not far away to greet him. But I heard that the commander was ordered to commit the crime of greedy wolf tonight, and there was a risk of death. Ordinarily he shouldn't have appeared here. This is right. Oh, it's really a coincidence. If others join Taoism, they must regard the theory of luck as a guide. But I have never believed in fate since I was a child. When I was 6 years old, an old fortune teller said that I was destined to have a killing star. I couldn't live to be 12 years old, so I raised my hand and gave the old man a slap in the face. Don't you think I'm living a good life now? Cao Huazheng opened his hands and walked around in front of the scholar and others. He immediately raised his eyebrows and said, "I didn't want to embarrass you at first, but you all know about this. It seems like someone is really causing trouble tonight." After saying that, Cao Huashen's eyes were as bright as lightning and his voice became serious. "Colluding with evil cults, hurting people's lives, and murdering royal relatives are all serious crimes. I'm afraid none of you will be able to leave today. Let me take you back and ask you a question clear. Bah, what kind of bullshit is this bad handsome guy? He really thinks he is a person. To put it bluntly, he is just a hawk of the imperial court. He has no official position and no power. I don't know how many taels of silver he earns every month. How can you be so self-satisfied despite your abilities? Willing to fall?" One person yelled and cursed. As soon as he said these words, Cao Huazheng came to this person in an instant. He raised his hand and a coiled dragon stick flew out of his sleeve and hit the person on the forehead. It is strange to say that the speed of the stick seems to be very slow, but when the opponent wants to parry, he realizes that his body is like a rusty iron tool. No matter how the brain drives it, the limbs and joints are still uncontrollable and helpless. The movement happened only when he finally raised his arm slightly. Snapped. Su Tong, who was hiding far away, smashed a watermelon with his palm. The watermelon juice and pulp splashed everywhere. He picked up a piece and put it to his mouth, while passing the other piece to Zhang Haisheng, who was standing aside. Eat quickly. I've been working hard all night and I'm almost starving. Let's get down to business after eating. Su Tong said as he held the broken watermelon and stuffed it into his mouth. He looked at the scene of fighting on the street in the distance and ate with relish. The reason why they are so far away is precisely because Zhang Haisheng discovered the traces of this bad handsome man in advance. In order not to be discovered, he took Su Tong and hid here. Otherwise, if they get closer, they may not be able to hide their whereabouts. Zhang Haisheng took the watermelon and looked at the irregular cracks of the watermelon with disgust. He took out a silver spoon from the prop book and sat down to eat it in small bites. Not to mention watermelon is quite sweet. Are we just going to watch like this? Zhang Haisheng was eating melon while watching the fight in the distance. I saw the coiled dragon stick in Cao Huashan's hand, and each stick was for a child. These elites of the Moto cult were not Cao Huashan's enemies at all. In fact, it is not surprising that although Cao Huasheng has not attained enlightenment, he is still one of the top masters in the world who has reached the pinnacle of attainment. It's just one step away from the top. Therefore, we should deal with these great masters one by one without any suspense. If he didn't have this strength, how could he dare to appear among these people rashly? Watching others fight is always more enjoyable than fighting yourself. It's just a matter of pleasure, it's not interesting for them to just look at it like this. What I mean is, if you don't tell me any more, are you going to fish in troubled waters and kill a few people from the Moto cult? Let's continue to sit here, and the fight will be over next. Su Tong held the watermelon and ate it wildly. After gnawing, it seemed that he was still not full, so he took out a cake from the prop book and put it in his mouth and started to eat it. After the cake was finished, Su Tong clapped his hands and wiped his clothes with his cream-covered palms casually. Then he said to Zhang Haisheng aside, "Don't worry, how much are the heads of those little bastards worth? First, let Cao Huasheng help us clean it up. You run. I'll cut off the queen." Seeing his subordinates hitting Cao Huasheng with sticks one by one, the helmsman Fu Hongzhen finally lost his temper and shouted for everyone to run away while he rushed towards Cao Huasheng. Although Fu Hongzhen is dressed as a scholar, he can firmly hold the position of helmsman in a place like the Moto sect, where the world's most ferocious criminals gather. Although he is not enlightened, his strength can be regarded as the first echelon of the top masters in the world. Cao Huasheng, you have gone too far to deceive others. Tonight you are destined to commit the crime of greedy wolf, and you are in danger of death. Don't make any mistakes. I saw a white jade fan in Fu Hongzhen's hand. The fan was unfolded. As he waved, 9 fire dragons poured out from the fan, spraying out large flames. Facing the fire dragon that was attacking Fu Hongzhen, Cao Huasheng did not dodge and allowed the fire dragon to attack him. In an instant, his clothes were burned to ashes by the fire, revealing Cao Huashan's strong figure. Locks of black hair flew in the sea of fire without wind, flying messily. His eyes were very sharp, like a sword unsheathed from the sky, and the light emitted was heart-stopping. The dragon stick danced in his hand. One end of the stick was a dragon head. There was a small ball in the mouth of the dragon head. When Cao Huasheng danced, it actually made bursts of dragon roaring sounds. The saint gave me the coiling dragon stick, and I will be the patron saint of the great Zhou dynasty. I shall sweep away evil spirits from the world for the great Zhou dynasty. Boom! The jade fan and the long stick collided, making a piercing roar that shook the internal organs of everyone in the Moto cult around them. Knowing that he was unable to intervene, he quickly rushed in the direction of Lu He over there. "Brother Shijin, leave quickly." At this time, someone saw that Shijin was not leaving and hurriedly stepped forward to pull him away. However, Shijin remained unmoved. He just stared at the battle with intense eyes and even clenched his fists tightly. Not only did he have no intention of leaving, instead he pushed away the person trying to dissuade him and shouted, "Count me in." After saying this, Shi Jin actually rushed forward to meet Cao Huazheng. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned when they saw this. Shui Liao, who had been praising Shi Jin before, was so angry that he stamped his feet and cursed, "Idiot." When the others saw this, they no longer cared about him, turned around and ran away. Everyone knew that this was a stupid young man who couldn't listen to advice at all, so they simply let him stay as a helper. Immediately, the group of people hurriedly ran towards Lu He. At this moment, Su Tong stood up and said, "Let's go, we're going to take the kill." Zhang Haisheng was startled when he saw that Su Tong had already stepped on the wall and chased after the Motuo cult members. This. Doesn't it mean that these little bastards are worthless? Zhang Haisheng muttered, looking at the unfinished watermelon in his hand, hesitating for a moment, and threw the watermelon into the prop book. After all, watermelon at this time was still quite expensive. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 685. Jiang. The harsh sound of metal collision resounded through the night sky. Fu Hongzhen fought harder and harder, feeling that the panlong stick in Cao Huashen's hand was getting heavier and heavier one after another. Fortunately, there was Shi Jin on the side to help. Even though he was not strong enough, he was still a martial arts master. With the cooperation of the two of them, they could only maintain a stalemate. Boom! Cao Huashen's panlong staff collided with Fu Hongzhen's jade fan, and the air was compressed to the extreme. It was like invisible air knives flying around. Only a continuous roar could be heard, gravel flew, and the ground beneath his feet exploded. Deep cracks, covered in dust. The huge force made Fu Hongzhen's face turn blue, and the white jade fan in his hand burst open. The tiger roars and the dragon soars. Fight against the 8 desolations. At this time, the muscles of Shi Jin's arms were knotted, and his sleeves were torn, revealing his powerful arms with a hint of dark red. Call out. His figure was like lightning, and when he waved his fist, he looked like a red dragon. So strong. Realizing the power of this punch, Cao Huazheng decisively gave up attacking Fu Hongzhen in front of him, and instead held the panlong stick in his hand. He twisted his hands forward and backward, and the stick made a click sound, turning from a short stick into a long stick. The stick's body hit the bricks at its feet, and it used the force to leap into the air to avoid Shi Jin's fist. Then it flipped in the air, swung the long stick in a circle in the air, and smashed it down towards Shi Jin. Dragon collapse. Suddenly the dragon roared on the dragon stick, and a golden dragon appeared in the air. The dragon's tail swung, and it came down with a force that shook the world and shattered the universe. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, Shi Jin gritted his teeth and chose to fight to the death. His right arm turned into a swimming dragon, and he barely resisted with the tiger-shaped fist in Xing Ai fist. His powerful right arm instantly became like a slippery python, and his fist and arm it collided violently with the dragon's tail. Peng, there was a muffled sound, and Shi Jin's huge body felt like being struck by lightning. The huge force came like a tide, turning his whole body into a cannonball and flying away. With a loud noise, the 2 houses behind him collapsed. One slice. However, Cao Huazheng was also hit in the chest, his face darkened, and a large wound appeared on his right arm, which opened up. However, with Cao Huashen's ability to control qi and blood, not a drop of blood was shed, and the wound was completely sealed. This is so powerful. In the ruins, Shi Jin struggled to get up, coughing out blood. He couldn't help but mutter a curse, and was pulled out of the broken wood and wall by a hand. Walk. Fu Hongzhen knew how powerful Cao Huazheng was. Seeing that he was already injured, he did not dare to pester him. Besides, after delaying for so long, almost all his men were on board. So Fu Hongzhen threw his finger, and 2 Yinju were thrown out from his hand, and they fell to the ground and exploded into billowing Yinsha. He immediately pulled Shijin and ran for his life. The two of them followed the originally planned route and headed straight to Luhe. Far away on the river bank, I saw 2 swaying figures guarding a boat. "Quick, start the boat." Seeing this, Fu Hongjun used all his strength to carry Shijin, who weighed at least 200 kilograms, and jumped onto the boat. "Quick, let's go." 2 people were seen at the bow and stern of the boat, wearing raincoats and holding long poles. They pushed hard under the water, and the boat quickly sailed into the rapids and headed east quickly. Seeing the boat rushing into the water faster and faster, Fu Hongjun's tense heart finally relaxed. This Cao Huazheng is really powerful. It's a pity that he failed to achieve enlightenment, otherwise our lives would have been handed down here today. Fu Hongjun couldn't help but feel frightened when he thought of the dragon coiling stick in Cao Huazhen's hand. This guy is too strong. He is also in the realm of Taoism, but it is difficult for him to go 10 rounds in his hands. If it weren't for Shijin's help, I might have died today. Thinking of this, Fu Hongjun couldn't help but cast a grateful look at Shijin, who was seriously injured on the side, took out a bottle of secret elixir from his arms and handed it to him. "Good boy, I knew I was right about you. Didn't you always want to learn the Master's 6 disaster hand? When I get back, I will report this matter to the Master and ask the Master to accept you as a disciple." When Shijin heard this, he nodded with an honest face, just like a child who got candy. He put the elixir in his mouth and chewed it. For a moment, his honest face showed bitterness. "Bitter? Ha ha ha, you silly boy." Fu Hongjun was amused and laughed when he saw this, and thought to himself, "I really let the leader say that this kid has a pure heart. As long as he is well trained, he will be a great help to their Moda cult in the future." Just as Fu Hongjun was thinking about returning this time, he took Shijin with him to tame him. Suddenly, he heard the waves rolling on the water, and a figure was already chasing him. "Interesting, if you two don't leave, could it be, are you kidding me that I'm not good at water?" Fu Hongjun was startled, and when he looked up, he saw Cao Huazheng behind him, stepping on a dead tree, speeding towards the side. When he looked again, he realized that the boat had been gliding in the water for so long, but it had always stopped in place. He was stunned. "Move forward half a minute." This. When Fu Hongjun saw this, his expression suddenly changed. He stood up and grabbed the guy at the stern of the boat. "What are you doing?" However, as soon as the other party turned around, Fu Hongjun was immediately stunned. It's you." Under the moonlight, he saw a fair face looking at him with a half-smile. It turned out to be the Crown Prince Li Zheng. "Impossible, you are already dead." When the leader Lu Ji killed Li Zheng, they all saw clearly from a distance. Li Zheng was injured by the leader Shi Ziyan, and his body was already decayed. Even if he didn't die on the spot, he would surely die within a short time or 3. Dying from anger. But now, not only was Su Tong not dead, he was even standing in front of him alive and well, which made Fu Hongjun feel unbelievable for a moment. "I want to die, that's why I came to you." Su Tong raised his head and looked at Fu Hongjun condescendingly. "You, the Motuo cult, have harmed me again and again, and today I will come to seek your life." "You." Fu Hongjun was startled and couldn't help but take a step back. As a result, his foot failed to step firmly and he almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Shijin hugged him and allowed Fu Hongjun to stand firm. "You. Why are you here?" Moto, teach other people." Fu Hongjun came to his senses in a moment, quickly calmed himself down, and asked Su Tong about the traces of the others. "You're talking about those people?" Su Tong raised his head. "Look at it above." After hearing this, Fu Hongjun followed Su Tong's gaze and saw several small boats floating out of the reeds. In addition to the brothers who had just escaped, there were several other Motuo disciples who also fell completely on the boats. Looking at these corpses, without exception, they all had a red dot on their foreheads, and they fell on the boat with a look of horror on their faces. Seeing the 28 stars of the Motuo cult, at least half of whom were here, Fu Hongzhen's eyes instantly became bloodshot. He gritted his teeth and stared at Su Tong. "It's all your fault." "No. I killed him." The fisherman at the bow of the boat tore off his raincoat and revealed his true face. It was Zhang Haisheng. "Your master's state of enlightenment almost caused my death. I also want to try how it feels to bully the younger ones. Don't tell me, it's really good." Seeing Zhang Haisheng, Fu Hongzhen's face suddenly turned pale. Facing Li Zheng and Cao Huazheng, he still had the idea of giving it a try, but when facing Zhang Haisheng, this idea was completely abandoned. In the state of enlightenment, he is already like a leader, the best in the world. Although he is in the state of enlightenment, the difference between this step is like the difference between heaven and earth. Ha 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 ha, it turns out that the prince is fine. I'm really happy and congratulated. Cao Huazheng stood on the deadwood and couldn't help but be surprised when he saw such a dramatic scene. He was also an eyewitness and saw that Su Tong was severely injured by Lu Ji, his flesh and blood rotted, and his life was cut off. Lu Ji had no choice. After all, he was among the best in the world and he was no match. If he couldn't catch the big fish, he could only catch these small fish. Unexpectedly, the prince turned out to be more skillful and managed to catch all the fish in the nest. Naturally, I couldn't help laughing at this moment. When Su Tong heard this, he just nodded lightly and said, "It's just good luck. It's not as lucky as this one." He also pointed at Zhang Haisheng. When Cao Huazheng heard this, he looked intently, feeling envious in his heart. There are countless masters in the world, and there are many top masters who have established sects. But since the Sui dynasty, it has become rare for people to enter Taoism before the age of 30. As for enlightenment, it is even rarer than 100 years. And the young man in front of him, who has not yet reached his 30s, is already one of the best in the world. How can one not envy him? Just as Cao Huazheng was sighing in his heart, Fu Hongzhen's expression was cold. "Since I have fallen into your hands, I have nothing to say. I just want to kill or behead you. Can you let my brother live? This man is just an idiot and doesn't understand I am not a member of the Moda cult, so I ask the commander-in-chief and the crown prince to be kind and let me go." As soon as Fu Hongzhen said these words, he didn't notice that a complicated look flashed in Shijin's eyes behind him. Once a bandit, always a thief, there is no difference. None of you can leave today. Your Majesty, leave these two to me. Cao Huazheng took out the panlong stick. No one could leave today, neither Fu Hongzhen nor the bald man. After Cao Huazheng said this, he suddenly felt something. He looked back sideways and saw a burst of bubbling under the water. A black figure slowly emerged from the water and stood on the water, his eyes glowing red. "Stare at yourself." Huh. Seeing the zombies that surfaced out of thin air, Cao Huazheng was immediately surprised, but immediately he felt relieved. "I said why I always feel unenergetic today. It turns out that you have been following me. I've been looking at this recently. It's really, there are so many weird things, and all kinds of demons and evil spirits dare to come out and cause trouble." After Cao Huazheng finished speaking, he suddenly remembered something, his pupils jumped suddenly, and he suddenly looked back at Su Tong. "The prince is you." He had not thought of it just now, but now he suddenly remembered that not long ago, zombies killed people and fled into the ghost market, and were later put into a coffin by the prince and taken away. When he thought of this, Cao Huazheng suddenly had an unpleasant premonition in his heart. Su Tong put his hands behind his back and looked at Cao Huazheng calmly. "Commander, I invite you to enter the urn today. You are doomed." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 686. The situation took a turn for the worse, and Fu Hongzhen, who was sitting on the boat, was stunned by the magnitude of the change. When Cao Huazheng heard Su Tong's admission, he was stunned for a few seconds. The cold wind was blowing on the water, and there was deathly silence. Ha 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 ha, Cao Huazheng, you are also in doom today. Suddenly there was a burst of laughter, and Fu Hongzhen threw his head back and laughed, feeling that this was simply the funniest thing in the world. Ha 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 ha, Shi Jin, do you think he is a fool? He must be a fool. Ha ha ha, I have already warned him that he will die tonight, but he still doesn't believe it. Do you think he is? Fu Hongzhen said, turning around and looking at Shi Jin behind him, but this time he looked back, he could no longer laugh. I saw Shi Jin sitting behind him, looking at him calmly, his clear eyes no longer dull as before. Come on, helmsman. Shi Jin. No, it should be said to be Gu Zibai. His voice was very soft, but he struck very quickly. After seeing the shock and relief flashing in Fu Hongzhen's eyes, he suddenly struck out and punched Fu Hongzhen hard in the heart. Boom! The dull cracking sound made Fu Hongzhen tremble, and he immediately fell into Gu Zibai's arms. Gu Zibai's face was expressionless, only his eyes were black and white. He reached out and closed Fu Hongzhen's eyes, then laid his body flat on the boat, stood up and walked behind Su Tong. This scene also completely surprised Cao Huazheng. Seeing Gu Zibai standing behind Su Tong, even this world-famous bad guy felt extremely surprised in his heart. Zhang Haisheng is from Hunshan prison, and this bald man is from Motuo cult. Plus the zombies at the back and the relationship between the prince himself and Buddhism. In front of Cao Huazheng, it was as if he had seen a large invisible net, quietly penetrating into all forces. The core of this large network is the eldest son Li Zheng in front of him, who has only been in Luoyang for half a month. Are you really Prince Gong's crown prince Li Zheng? Cao Huazheng stared straight at Su Tong's face. Please report to the newspaper that although Li Zheng, the crown prince of Prince Gong, is uneducated, he has wanted to be an official since he was a child. Therefore, although some of his actions in Yuyang City are strange, it can be seen that Li Zheng's behavior is words and deeds can be explained. But now, the prince, who had just arrived in Luoyang for only half a month, had already unknowingly infiltrated his influence into all parties under the eyes of countless people. As a bad coach, he didn't get even a little bit of information. This method and this scheming made people feel more and more frightened the more they thought about it. Cao Huazheng now had to wonder whether the person in front of him was really a child of Prince Gong's family. Commander Cao, I have no choice but to forgive my rudeness. After saying this, Su Tong slowly raised his hands and bowed heavily to Cao Huazheng. Seeing his hypocrisy, Cao Huazheng was about to taunt him, but he didn't know that not everyone could bear this kind of worship. Suddenly, there was a bang in front of his eyes, as if something hit his forehead, and his head buzzed, almost about to fall into the water. At this moment, Gao Zhou and Gu Zibai both took action. After all, Cao Huazheng is the top master in the world. Sensing something bad, there seemed to be snakes swimming inside the clothes, which bulged up. Gu Zibai punched him, and he felt that there was an inflated balloon under Cao Huazheng's clothes. Not only did the force of his punch disappear, at the same time, he took advantage of the force and turned around quickly. He picked up the dragon stick in his hand and hit Gao Zhou's sharp claws. Boom! This deafening knocking sound made Gao Zhou's hands numb. Even though he had the body of a yaksha, he had to be shaken out. Ha! With one successful blow, Cao Huazheng waved the dragon stick with both hands, and saw the dragon roaring on the stick, making a deafening roar. Immediately he hit the water in front of him with a stick, broken. Suddenly, the water under Cao Huashan's feet exploded into 10-meter-high waves, covering the sky and the earth and throwing waves in all directions. But what Cao Huasheng didn't expect was that the towering water did not turn into rolling waves and crash into all directions to give him a chance to escape, as he expected. Instead, it froze in mid-air. "Commander, if I want to take action, how can I give him a chance?" I saw the water waves rolling. Su Tong stood quietly on the boat, and a light blue dao fruit appeared behind him, which was the water dao fruit. He uses water to enter the Tao, so he naturally has the ability to control water. This is why this small boat will always remain still on the lake, waiting for Cao Huasheng to catch up. Hearing this, Cao Huasheng was shocked and angry, but he had no intention of surrendering. The dragon stick danced in his hand, and for a moment the dragon roared to the sky, and golden thunder light wrapped around the long stick. "Kill!" Cao Huasheng raised his long stick in his hand and flew into a golden dragon, attacking Su Tong directly. As the saying goes, to catch the thief first, catch the king. Only by capturing the prince would he have a chance to escape. Facing the Qinjun dragon staff sweeping towards him, a cyan light shield rose in front of Su Tong. The Xianyuan shield is activated, and the surrounding water elements quickly boil and converge on this light shield. As Pan Long struck down, the Xianyuan shield was quickly dented. But at the same time, countless icicles burst out from the shield surface. This caught Cao Huasheng a little off guard. He could only twist the coiling dragon stick in his hand like a swimming dragon, and swept the long stick across to interrupt all these icicles. But this step is wrong, and the next step will be an abyss. The moment he almost defeated these icelings, he heard the roar of a tiger. It was Gu Zibai. The huge fist made it difficult for Cao Huasheng to dodge, so he could only raise the coiled dragon stick in his hand to block it in front of his chest. Boom! Suddenly, a huge force struck, and the tiger's mouth burst open. The huge force caused the dragon coiling stick in Cao Huasheng's hand to fly out, and his body flew backwards and hit the river bed. Evil God curse! Earth beam! Gao Zhou clasped his fingers and stepped on the ground. Before Cao Huasheng could get up, a dozen pairs of pale and swollen hands suddenly appeared from under the river bed, firmly grasping Cao Huasheng's body and quickly pulling him into the muddy mud. Break! At the critical moment, Cao Huasheng flew with all his strength, shattered his palms, and jumped up from the mud. But at this time, two zombies jumped out of the mud and exploded in front of Cao Huasheng. Boom! The broken blood and bones caused Cao Huasheng to suffer a heavy blow, and he vomited out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were still turning black. Before he could stand firm, a huge shadow stood in front of him. 12 sets of Zingi Iquan were endlessly varied in Gu Zibai's fists, grabbing, and hitting, until Cao Huasheng was kicked to the ground, and a sharp claw tore off Cao Huasheng's back from behind. Puff! Even though he was a bad handsome man, Cao Huasheng couldn't help but let out a scream at this moment. The cold and biting corpse poison quickly spread all over his body, and his face turned black. Send the commander on his way. In his blurry vision, he could only see Crown Prince Li Zheng raising his hand slightly and bowing down to him again. This time, Cao Huasheng only saw a blurry black shadow in his sight, and immediately he completely lost consciousness. He only heard Su Tong's voice, "Get him as soon as possible, someone will be here soon." About one stick of incense passed. Two small boats came quickly on the water, carrying lanterns and moving quickly under the oars of a group of people. Handsome. On the bow of the boat, there was a figure dressed as an old farmer. His eyes quickly swept across the huge river, hoping to find the handsome figure. Just looking around, I saw that the water was full of corpses, which was shocking. These corpses are all members of the Moda cult. The commander-in-chief must be fine. Someone recognized that the corpse was one of the 28 constellations of the Moda religion, and comforted everyone on the boat. That's right, the commander is unparalleled in bravery, he must be. Before he finished speaking, the remaining words suddenly seemed to be stuck in his throat. I saw a small boat floating slowly on the water, with a lone person standing on the boat. Under the moonlight, his bloody body was exposed, as well as the token hanging around his waist. That is the token of a bad handsome man, and only a bad handsome man can hold this order. However, the moment everyone saw the token, they were filled with grief. Commander. I saw the body fixed on the boat, standing upright, but the head above the throat meridian was still missing. Seeing this scene, everyone hurriedly wanted to rush forward, but they didn't know that a cold wind suddenly blew up, and the body fell into the water with a plop. By the time everyone jumped into the river and rushed up, the body had disappeared without a trace. No trace left. Are you sure this is okay? On the river bank, Su Tong and Zhang Haisheng looked at the flashing lights on the water from a distance, and could vaguely hear bursts of miserable cries. They were afraid that after today, they would definitely shock the world. Zhang Haisheng couldn't help but look at Su Tong. What's the problem? Marshal Cao fought hard against the Mochuo cult and died of exhaustion in the end. No one can be seen alive or dead, and no corpses can be seen. Who can find any fault with it? Su Tong pursed his lips and smiled, turned around and jumped on the big fat body. Let's go. Where to go? Zhang Haisheng raised his head and looked at the big fat paper man summoned by Su Tong in front of him, frowning and asked. Su Tong's brows were slightly raised, and there was a hint of anger in his eyes. Of course I'm going to find Tu Fei Yuan. I can't just let this bill go. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 687. What? Tu Feiwen is dead. Su Tong and Zhang Haisheng did not go back to Liuyi Museum, but returned to Huangji first. After confirming that Guoyi and others were safe and sound in the imperial post, they ate breakfast and waited for dawn before setting off for the Six Arts Hall. As a result, it was not until they arrived at the Six Arts Museum that they learned that Gu Peiyuan was dead. The top supervisor of the generation, the supervisor of Hunshan Prison, died with a smile on his face after seeing Zhang Haishan's Taoism last night. According to Lu Yiguan, Gu Peiyuan passed away peacefully, with a satisfied smile on his face. After hearing the news, Su Tong and Zhang Haisheng couldn't help but look at each other. The former has a depressed look on his face, while the latter has a complicated expression. Their moods were completely different. Such a familiar scene reminded Su Tong of an old friend, and the fat, round face popped into his mind, with a sly smile on his face, and his mouth mocking him. I know you're not dead. If you don't die, I'm going to die. Why are you still asking me to settle the score? Come and hit me, just a little bit. Damn it, can't you afford all these fun things to learn? Su Tong cursed. Zhang Haisheng was in a different mood. He had both hatred and respect for the pervert Gu Peiyuan. If he hadn't allowed him to practice his heart in a brothel and arranged for him to come to the Liuyi Pavilion, he would have been away from enlightenment for a long time. At this moment, I had truly entered the realm of enlightenment, as he said. Before I could go to this fat man and ask him why he wanted to help me, I didn't expect that the other person was already deceased. This was really unexpected and caught the two of them off guard. Your Majesty, this is the lottery you won last night, Your Majesty. At this time, the steward of the Liuyi Museum delivered something to Su Tong, a square box. When the box was opened, a golden fruit appeared. This is the golden Bodhi fruit left by Princess Taiping. This is a rare treasure in the world. It is said that it was one of the 7 fruits produced by the Bodhi tree when Sakyamuni attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Whether it is true or not is unknown. But this thing is indeed a national treasure sent as tribute from Tianzhu. Just because of Tu Fei Yuan's incident, Su Tong couldn't feel any joy in his heart, so he put the things away with a cold face. He stared at the steward in front of him with a smile on his face and said, "Is this the end? You are not going to give me an explanation for what happened last night. Now that Gu Pei Yuan is dead, this account must be settled clearly with the Six Arts Hall first." This. The steward pretended to be confused and said, "Why would the prince say this? How you said that?" Su Tong narrowed his eyelids. "You Liu Yiguan trapped me in the game and almost made me die. Now you want to pick yourself off. I didn't know until I got there that I was the host last night. Why did Lu Ji and the others know the news so quickly? It's always been like this in the Liu Yi Museum. Whoever accepts the invitation is the host. We thought the prince knew, so we didn't tell them. As for how those thieves got the news, this matter is indeed related to the Sixth Art Museum. After all, the prince's poetry is amazing. Lu Yiguan released the news early in order to let my great Zhou talents have a glimpse of the prince's unparalleled talent." The steward had obviously already responded, and when faced with Su Tong's challenge, he responded fluently. Such an answer seemed like he had taken responsibility, but inside and out, he seemed to be telling Su Tong that what Lu Yiguan did was a normal behavior and there was no responsibility at all. If it were anyone else, they would just grit their teeth, grab their things and leave. It's just that this steward may not be clear. The person standing in front of him is not the Li family, royal family who dare not speak loudly, but a complete fanatic. Faced with such confusion, Su Tong glanced at Zhang Haisheng beside him. Zhang Haisheng naturally understood what Su Tong meant and took 2 steps back knowingly. At this time, Su Tong grinned and said, Yes, I don't understand the rules. I heard that as long as you are recognized by the Liu Yi Museum, you can get a good job even in the Ministry of Household Affairs and the Ministry of Works, right?" When the steward heard this, he didn't know what Su Tong was going to do, so he could only answer truthfully, "Yes, the Six Arts Museum has the right to evaluate the world's craftsmen. This is an honor bestowed by the saint." "Oh, that's right. In fact, I am also a craftsman. Since I am here, you might as well give me a test." "Huh? Your Majesty, please don't joke." As soon as the steward finished speaking, Su Tong's face suddenly turned cold. "Who are you kidding me? I am a craftsman who makes fire." I saw Su Tong Xiao's voice fell, and he stepped hard on the bluestone bricks under his feet. In an instant, the demonic power was activated, and the blazing high temperature suddenly exploded with Su Tong as the center. "Hey! I'm in trouble." On the streets of Luoyang, people were shocked when they saw the sudden billowing black smoke. After a while, Wu Haopu was alerted. The big shop and small shop pulled water trucks and rushed towards the direction of the fire with buckets of water. It was only when I arrived at the Six Arts Hall that I found black smoke billowing inside the Six Arts Hall, but black smoke was rising, but there was no open flame. It was just black smoke billowing, filling the Six Arts Hall with a smoky atmosphere. Just when the shopkeepers were about to lead people in, they saw Su Tong and Zhang Haisheng walking out of the gate of Liu Yi Hall. "That's it? Are you testing the world's craftsmen? You can't even understand how to play with fire, rubbish." After Su Tong finished cursing, he looked back at Zhang Haisheng, "Follow me back to Huangji. No, Gu Pei Yuan has a favor with me, and one of my tasks is to join the Hunshan prison." Zhang Haisheng planned to return to Hunshan prison, and he was also preparing to see Gu Pei Yuan off. Su Tong originally planned to go and have a look. But after a second thought, he decided to forget it. He was afraid that if he saw Gu Pei Yuan's body, he would not be able to help but use the soul arresting technique on him. This old fat man had tricked him quite a bit, so letting him leave like this was an advantage for him. After the two separated, Su Tong walked back to the imperial post. When he returned to the imperial post, as soon as he entered the gate of the imperial post, he saw a group of Ashina and others standing at the door waiting for him. Your Majesty is indeed a blessed person, he can survive this. Ashina held her arms in front of Sutong and stared at Sutong with a bad tone. Apparently he was still brooding over the incident of Sutong from the Six Arts Hall dragging him into the water. Sutong looked at Ashina and glanced at this guy's luck. Zhang Haisheng and Lu Ji were not there, and Ashina seemed to feel that he could do it again. The golden lion shook its golden mane and began to show off its power. Even his own luck was invisibly suppressed by Ashina's golden lion. This is also something that can't be helped. This guy's luck is indeed very strong, and only a pervert like Lu Ji and a pervert like Zhang Haisheng can stabilize his position. Although he survived the death disaster, his luck was much higher than before. A hanging coffin soared above the blue clouds, and there was a faint golden light radiating on the coffin, indicating that he might have good luck during this period. But overall, it can't be compared with Ashina's luck. Sutong's eyebrows slightly raised, and just as he was about to speak, Eunuch Dai Yud hurried over. If you have something to say, don't do anything. Eunuch Dai hurriedly stopped in front of Sutong and Ashina. You two, this is an important place for the post house. If you have anything to say, please talk it over, but don't do anything. Ashina heard this and sneered, my father-in-law misunderstood. I just want to communicate with the crown prince. There is no exaggeration in taking action. After saying that, he glared at Sutong fiercely, Your Majesty, take care, let's talk next time. After saying that, Ashina led the people towards the door. Your Majesty, don't argue with these bastard barbarians. These barbarians won't be arrogant for long. As long as the imperial court frees up its hands, my army of the Celestial Empire will wipe them out in an instant. After Ashina and others left, Dai Yud was afraid that the prince would be angry, so he opened his mouth to explain. In fact, Sutong was not angry at all. After hearing Dai Yud's words, he couldn't help but joked, since Eunuch Dai knows the power of my heaven, why should he be afraid of these barbarians? Hey, even though our family is imperfect, he still seeks his own destiny. If there is a son like this in our family, he will definitely join the army in this life, armed with a knife and armor, and fight with these barbarians. Don't miss the opportunity to travel to the human world. Seeing the yearning in Dai Yud's eyes, Sutong couldn't help but look at this father-in-law differently. My righteous father-in-law is much better than the two I met before. Sutong sighed involuntarily. They are both eunuchs, so why is the gap so big? Dai Yud was confused. Who does the crown prince refer to? It's okay, we are two old friends, so don't mention it. Oh, there is one more thing I haven't asked my father-in-law about. Your Majesty, you are polite, but there is no harm in asking. I wonder when these barbarians came back last night. Dai Yud thought about the time after hearing this. I came back early. I probably came back when I was ugly. Once I came back, I never came out again. Dai Yud remembered what happened last night very clearly. Sutong calculated the time and realized that Ashina might have hurried back after they escaped and lured Lu Ji away. Thinking about it, Ashina was also unlucky last night. He thought he could do whatever he wanted with his luck, but little did he know that he met two perverts, Zhang Haisheng and Lu Ji. He was almost dragged into the water by Sutong, so you can imagine the panic in his heart. What's going on, Prince? Seeing Sutong's silence, Dai Yud thought there was something important and hurriedly asked. Oh, it's okay. Thanks for the advice, father-in-law. There was a lot going on last night, so I'll go back and rest first. Your Majesty, please do as you please. If you need anything, just call us home. Dai Yud raised his hand slightly, turned around and left with the people. After Sutong waited for Dai Yud to leave, he did not go back. Instead, while there was no one around, he quietly turned around and walked to the back house of the imperial post, where Ashina and others lived. After seeing the guard outside the door, Sutong jumped up, his figure as light as a civet cat, and jumped over the wall of the courtyard behind him. He saw that the courtyard behind him had been abandoned for many years, as Dai Yud said. Overgrown. Squeak. At this moment, a grey shadow emerged from the corner. It was the Ji Xiang that Su Tong had released before. Ji Xiang jumped up on the ground, threw himself into Su Tong's arms, and danced to guide Su Tong in the direction. After walking around for a while and walking straight down the alley, I saw an inconspicuous corner of the courtyard wall, where an altar had been auspiciously decorated. Are you sure you hammered the nails into the head of his bed? Just in case, Su Tong confirmed with Ji Xiang again. It wasn't until he saw Ji Xiang nodding that Su Tong felt relieved. He took out the prepared lantern from the prop book and hung it on the altar. Then he took out the 3 dog heads and placed them on the table. Let's see how long your good luck can last. Su Tong narrowed his eyes, made a magic spell with his hands, and began to recite the spell according to the spell given to him by his master.